As long as he took a fancy to it, not to mention 100 steps, even 1,000 steps would be completed. "What nonsense are you thinking?" he asked with a frown. Han Yunqi resentfully stopped talking, but for some reason, she couldn't help but recall Long Fei's words again and again. "Some people will walk past you before brushing past you, won't they?" The more she thought, the sadder she felt. She shook her head to clear her mind. Very soon, they arrived at Taoran Restaurant. Han Yunqi saw Duanmu Bei as soon as she stepped out of the carriage. She was extremely disappointed. "Looks like we won't be able to get rid of this guy. Do you think you can depose the crown prince of a country with just a few words?" Long Fei murmured. "You?" Han Yunqi was stunned. Could it be that Long Fei was provoking Duanmu Bei on purpose? Wasn't it to topple him? Emperor Kongcheng is smarter than Tianhui. Moreover, Duanmu Bei's mother's clan has great influence in Western Zhou. It'll take more than a day to shake him. Duanmu Yao even colluded with Juni Xie, but Emperor Kongqing only ordered her banished from the imperial palace. He didn't chase after her to Celestial Mountain. There's a reason for all of this. I'll explain it to you later, Long Fei murmured. Now Han Yunqi was even more certain that Long Fei had provoked Duanmu Bei to help her vent her anger. Her heart warmed as she decided not to disappoint Long Fei's efforts, nor her own forbearance. Duanmu Bei had to pay the price. After getting off the carriage, Long Fei and Emperor Kongqing only nodded as before. Long Fei ignored Duanmu Bei, and Han Yunqi didn't even spare him a glance. She wanted to nod at Emperor Kongqing as a form of greeting, but the emperor didn't even spare her a glance. He didn't even give her a chance. Han Yunqi nodded halfway, but didn't feel awkward. She pretended nothing had happened. Duanmu Bei, on the other hand, saw it, and his lips curled in disdain. Han Yunqi saw it too, but she didn't fuss over it. She held her head high and puffed out her chest as she walked alongside Long Fei. Her greeting to Emperor Kongqing wasn't out of humility, nor was it to curry favor with him. Emperor Kongqing's reaction revealed his narrow-mindedness and narrow-mindedness. What was there to be embarrassed about? Emperor Kongqing glanced at Han Yunqi out of the corner of his eye. Although he hated this woman for stealing his son-in-law, he couldn't help but admire her bearing and strength of character. If it had been any other woman today, even if she was from the imperial family, she wouldn't have been so calm and at ease. Naturally, Long Fei saw all of it with his own eyes. The entire tea house had been booked, so it was empty. A servant led the way. Emperor Kongqing gestured to Long Fei to go first. Long Fei didn't say anything, but politely gestured for Emperor Kongqing to go first. The two of them didn't argue and walked forward together. One was the emperor, the other the Duke of Qin. Although they were on equal footing, Long Fei had the upper hand. Han Yunqi walked confidently beside Long Fei, while Duanmu Bei followed respectfully behind Emperor Kongqing. As the crown prince, he was undoubtedly the most humble of them all. Unfortunately, he still refused to come to his senses. From time to time, he would glare resentfully at Long Fei and Han Yunqi. They took their seats in the tea house in the middle of the lake. Like northernly, the people of Western Zhou preferred wine to tea. Taoranju was one of the rarest tea houses in Western Zhou. It was also one of the most expensive tea houses in Western Zhou. They served a type of tea called bramble tea, a precious specialty of Western Zhou. Once they were seated, tea was served. Emperor Kongqing wasn't in a hurry to get down to business. Instead, he introduced bramble tea to Long Fei. Duke of Qin, this tea grows on the brambles of the desert. Only 100 or so leaves can be plucked from a single patch of bramble land every year. As a result, only 2 jars of bramble tea are produced in the Tunga Desert each year. One is in Taoranju, and the other is in Zhen's possession. As Emperor Kongqing spoke, he invited Long Fei to sample the tea. Try it. You didn't get to try it when you came 7 or 8 years ago. You must try it today. Long Fei nodded, but casually handed the tea to Han Yunqi. I wanted to bring you here to try this bramble tea 7 or 8 years ago. Unfortunately, you didn't come. Han Yunqi was stunned. What was Long Fei talking about? 7 or 8 years ago, the distance between them wasn't just 100 steps. It could be considered several thousand years. Emperor Kongqing and Duanmu Bei were also stunned. Father and son glanced at each other in shock. Could it be that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had been together since 7 or 8 years ago? Was that why he'd always looked down on Yao Yao? Although it was a surprise, it made sense. Han Yunqi was betrothed to Long Fei Yi before she was even born. Naturally, she'd known Long Fei Yi before Yao Yao did. It turned out that this woman really was pretending to be a good-for-nothing at the Han estate. Han Yunqi quickly accepted the tea. After taking a few sips, she said, "Sweet? You hate it the most." Both Emperor Kongcheng and Duanmu Bei felt awkward. Long Fei Yi took the teacup and sniffed it. "Is this tea sweet?" he asked Emperor Kongcheng. "Yes," Emperor Kongcheng replied honestly. Long Fei Yi didn't say whether he liked it or not. He only nodded and set down the teacup. Emperor Kongcheng quickly recovered from his embarrassment and ordered someone to change it to Tianning's black tea. Duanmu Bei didn't even dare to look at his imperial father. How was he supposed to know that Long Fei Yi didn't like sweet things? Although there wasn't the smell of war, the husband and wife were singing the same tune to give Emperor Kongcheng a show of strength. After drinking a few cups of black tea, Duanmu Bei stood up with his teacup in hand. Although he was proud and spoiled, he still had self-awareness. He used the tea in place of wine to toast Long Fei Yi. "Your Highness Duke of Qin." This one was impetuous just now and made a slip of the tongue. "My intentions weren't sincere. I hope that a great man like you won't hold a grudge against a lowly person like me and forgive this one." It was enough for a proper crown prince to go this far. As he spoke, he downed his cup of tea in one gulp. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi was busy pouring tea for Han Yunqi. Just like at the Chamberlain of Dependencies, Duanmu Bei treated him like heir. Duanmu Bei raised 2 more cups of tea and downed them both in one gulp as an apology. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi ignored him. Duanmu Bei helplessly cast an innocent look at Emperor Kongcheng, who kept a straight face. It wasn't clear whether he was angry at Duanmu Bei or Long Fei Yi, but he didn't say a word. Duanmu Bei was stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he went forward, would he have to kneel down and apologize to Long Fei Yi? How could that be possible? If he retreated, wouldn't this matter be ruined? Although his imperial father's gaze was frighteningly dark, he could only beg him for mercy. The pavilion was silent. Han Yunqi was calm and composed as she drank tea and admired the lake scenery. After Long Fei Yi poured her a few cups of tea, he poured one for Emperor Kongcheng as well. Emperor Kongcheng was also polite as he chatted with the Duke of Qin. It seemed like he'd given up on Duanmu Bei. In reality, Duanmu Bei was truly stupid. Both Emperor Kongcheng and Han Yunqi knew that as long as Duanmu Bei apologized to Han Yunqi, the Duke of Qin would be appeased and this matter would be dropped. Unfortunately, Duanmu Bei couldn't accept this and couldn't swallow his anger. He could only stand there. The longer he stood there, the angrier Emperor Kongcheng became. He originally knew that Duanmu Bei had been provoked by Long Fei Yi on purpose, so he didn't really plan on punishing him. Now that he saw how stupid Duanmu Bei was, Emperor Kongcheng was determined to punish him. Drinking tea wasn't like eating or drinking. If there wasn't enough common topics to talk about, it wouldn't last long. Before long, Long Fei Yi was about to leave. Duanmu Bei panicked. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one was wrong. What will it take for you to forgive this one?" It would have been better if he hadn't said that. Now that he did, Emperor Kongcheng almost smashed his teacup. What would Long Fei Yi do? Of course he would continue to ignore Duanmu Bei. Not only did he ignore Duanmu Bei, but he also gave Emperor Kongcheng a meaningful look, as if to tell him that he didn't care about Duanmu Bei. Emperor Kongcheng's original plan was for him to appear incognito and make the Duke of Qin stay, giving the crown prince an opportunity to apologize. But now it looked like he had no choice but to apologize in person. Otherwise, he really wouldn't be able to keep the Duke of Qin. He finally looked straight at Han Yunqi. Chapter 572. Finally, Emperor Kongcheng looked straight at Han Yunqi. Just then, he'd given her the cold shoulder when she was about to greet him. Now he finally had a favor to ask of her. If she didn't put on airs, then she wouldn't be Han Yunqi. In the past, before she'd won Long Fei Yi's favor and had to rely on herself for everything, she'd already dared to challenge Emperor Tianhui, much less now. Despite knowing that Emperor Kongcheng was staring at her, Han Yunqi pretended not to notice. She lowered her eyes to the tea in her cup without a word. Emperor Kongqing knew that if he wanted to keep the Duke of Qin, he'd have to appease this woman's anger first. If he'd known earlier that Duamu Bei was so stupid, he wouldn't have neglected Han Yunqi just then. Now it was too late for regrets. Emperor Kongqing quickly withdrew his gaze and said, "The two of you." The crown prince spoke rudely. "It was my Western Zhou that was lacking in manners. I ask that you give Zhen some face and refrain from harboring resentment in your heart and ruining your mood for this visit." A single "my Western Zhou was lacking in manners" was a big deal. Although it wasn't an outright apology, it was still a rare sight for a ruler of a nation to say such words. Long Fei finally spoke up. "Your lordship has never argued with impetuous children." Emperor Kongqing's words are too serious. He was giving Emperor Kongqing face, but also clearly scolding Duamu Bei. But what could Duamu Bei do? If Long Fei could just let things go like this, Duamu Bei thought, I'd accept being called an impetuous child. But even though Long Fei had forgiven him, Han Yunqi's face was still gloomy. She said unhappily, "I wanted to stay a few more days and take the chance to tour Western Zhou's desert scenery, but now I'm not in the mood." Finally, Duanmu Bei came to his senses. Despite his unwillingness, he quickly poured some tea for Han Yunqi. "Qin Wangfei, this one has always been outspoken. If I've offended you in any way, I ask for your forgiveness." The person in question had finally apologized. It was useless. Han Yunqi sneered in her heart. She carried out Long Fei's policy of ignoring Duanmu Bei to the end. Emperor Kongqing knew he still had to get past Han Yunqi, so he took advantage of the situation to say, "Qin Wangfei, we've heard about what happened at the Honglu Temple. It was indeed the Crown Prince's fault. Why don't we have the Crown Prince accompany you and the Duke of Qin on a tour tomorrow as an apology?" Just now, Emperor Kongqing had used the words "you too" in his apology, which naturally included his apology to Han Yunqi. Now that he'd made such a concession, coupled with the Duke of Qin's concession, Han Yunqi should be content. However, Han Yunqi feigned ignorance and said angrily, "Emperor Kongqing, aren't you being too partial to your son? Accompanying us on a tour wasn't a punishment, it was clearly a reward. There's no one like you. What a bully. Yunqi, don't be rude." Long Fei scolded immediately. Han Yunqi said angrily, "Your Highness, did I say anything wrong?" Emperor Kongqing was clearly biased. "Accompanying us on a tour counts as a punishment? If this gets out, what do you think? If Crown Prince Yi didn't bully us, would there be no one else in Western Zhou to accompany us on a tour?" Long Fei was speechless, but could only sigh softly. "In any case, Chunxia will leave today. Chunxia will never come to Western Zhou again." Han Yunqi crossed her arms in front of her chest and pursed her lips, looking completely unreasonable. That's right, she was being unreasonable on purpose. If this was a formal setting, Han Yunqi's words as Qin Wangfei would be considered unreasonable. But this was a private meeting, so Han Yunqi didn't lose her status as a woman. Of course, Emperor Kongqing could tell that Han Yunqi was doing it on purpose, but the Duke of Qin looked like he couldn't do anything about it. What else could he do? "Someone come, pass on Zhen's orders. The Crown Prince is to be grounded for 3 months and forfeited a year's worth of salary. Without Zhen's permission, no one is to enter the Eastern Palace." Emperor Kongqing had no choice but to bite the bullet. "Imperial Father." Duamu Bei panicked. Emperor Kongqing glowered at him. "Someone come, take the Crown Prince back." "Imperial Father, this son knows his wrongs. I know my wrongs. Imperial Father, please spare this son this once." "Imperial Father, Imperial Father." Duanmu Bei was dragged to the door, but he was still shouting and begging for mercy. 3 months was too much for him. In the fight for the throne, he had always been ruthless and merciless when it came to eradicating dissidents. Now that he had been put under house arrest for 3 months, it was enough for those forces that had been trampled to death by him to rise again. Their counterattack was bound to be even more ruthless. How could he not be afraid? How could he not be afraid of losing the position of heir apparent in 3 months? This time, Han Yunqi knew when to stop. Emperor Kongqing is wise. A son like this who shames you should be punished severely as an example to others. Han Yunqi laughed. Emperor Kongqing couldn't bring himself to laugh, nor could he stay any longer. After chatting for a bit, he said that he had urgent matters to attend to and had to leave. Before he left, he summoned General Chu to receive him. General Chu had just received news that the Crown Prince was under house arrest for 3 months and was in the middle of discussing how to salvage the situation. When he received Emperor Kongcheng's order, he almost dropped the teacup in his hand. He didn't expect to meet Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi so soon, nor did he expect to receive them. With Crown Prince Ye's example, as well as the Nether clan's secrets, General Chu couldn't help but feel nervous even though he'd seen much of the world and had weathered many storms. When he arrived, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi were taking a boat tour around the lake. Long Fei Yi personally rowed the boat and didn't have any servants to attend to them. In other words, no one could eavesdrop on the couple's conversation. General Chu had naturally planted spies when he'd helped Duanmu Bei reserve the Taoran Inn. Unfortunately, he couldn't find anything now, so all he could do was sit by the lake and wait. He knew that Long Fei Yi's target wasn't Crown Prince Yi, but the Chu clan. But he couldn't figure out how Long Fei Yi was planning to deal with the Chu clan. Currently, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi's boat was docked in the middle of the lake. Your Highness, Chen Xie must be losing face for being so unreasonable, right? Han Yunqi teased. Long Fei Yi arched a brow at her and gave her a rare compliment. You're getting smarter and smarter. Isn't it all because I learned from you? Han Yunqi was rarely good at flattery. Long Fei Yi examined her from head to toe, but didn't answer. Instead, he returned her smile. It was much harder to make this guy who cherished his words like gold smile than to make him speak. Han Yunqi had gotten used to his smiles at some point. Where's Tang Li and Chu Shifeng? Han Yunqi asked. They went to Thousand Buddha Cave to scout the way. Long Fei Yi replied. Did they find anything? Han Yunqi asked hastily. Chu Shifeng's been scouting for days without any news. Tang Li just went yesterday, but I don't know if he can get in, Long Fei Yi said. To them, Thousand Buddha Cave was much more important than dealing with the Nether clan. The Chu clan knew where the Wood of 10,000 Poisons was, but they hadn't gotten their hands on it after all these years. Han Yunqi had a premonition that they'd be staying in Western Zhou's White City for a while. By sunset, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had reached the shore. General Chu immediately put on a smiling face and greeted them with all the proper etiquette. He didn't mention a word about the Nether clan or the Chu clan. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi pretended nothing had happened as they followed General Chu back to the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Before they left, General Chu said, Duke of Qin, tomorrow's meeting with His Majesty is scheduled for after morning court. I'll come to pick you up then. Long Fei Yi nodded without a word. General Chu clasped his hands and turned to leave, but he couldn't help but turn back after he'd left the Chamberlain of Dependencies. He'd discussed things with the Nether clan head before. If Long Fei Yi refused to talk to them, they'd have to find Long Fei Yi of their own accord. Otherwise, they'd be in a passive position forever. Now was the perfect time to clear things up. Otherwise, who knew what Long Fei Yi would talk to Emperor Kongcheng tomorrow? As if expecting General Chu to turn back, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi remained in their seats without moving. As soon as General Chu entered the room, he signaled for all the servants to withdraw. When he faced Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi alone, his expression was gloomy. However, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi didn't move, which made General Chu very uncomfortable. Duke of Qin, you should know what the old man wants, right? General Chu got straight to the point. Long Fei Yi replied with 3 words, I don't know. Then why did you let Witch Ant come back? General Chu asked. Long Fei Yi replied, to this prince, 1 Chu Tianin is enough. You. General Chu was furious. What did you do to Tianin? Long Fei Yi didn't answer. Instead, he sneered. Someone told this prince before that the Nether clan's secret art is called the driving arrow art. Arrows without a bow are incomparably powerful. This prince didn't believe it then, but I didn't expect to experience it so soon. General Chu grew alarmed at his words. He, the Nether clan head, and Witch Ant had never been able to figure out how Long Fei Yi knew that the driving arrow art was the Nether clan's secret history. How could he be so sure that the Chu clan was the Nether clan's descendant? After all, the driving arrow art was a secret of the Nether clan. It wasn't something that just anyone could know about. Unless one was trustworthy and entrusted with important tasks, One wouldn't have the right to learn the art. Even Chu Chinga didn't know about the clan's secret, nor did she know how to use it. Long Fei Ye's words today meant that someone must have told him. But who could have told him? General Chu was absolutely certain that no one in the Nether clan would dare to reveal the secret. There was only one other person who could do it. That person was the only outsider in the world who knew about the Nether clan's secret, Gu Beiwe. When he recalled how Gu Beiwe had refused the Nether clan head's offer to save Chu Tianyin and induce Chu Chinga's labor, General Chu grew even more suspicious. He wasn't stupid enough to ask Long Fei Yi who had revealed the secret. Even if he did, Long Fei Yi wouldn't tell him. Duke of Qin, since you've left the Nether clan some face, why don't we get straight to the point? We'll meet at Taoranin tonight and discuss everything with the Nether clan head. How about it? General Chu lowered his voice. Han Yunqi had always assumed that Chu Tianyin's father was the Nether clan head. She never expected the Nether clan head to be someone else. General Chu, it's getting late. Please go back, he refused coldly. His attitude made General Chu even more uneasy. He said, Your Highness Duke of Qin, it was Tianyin's fault for what happened in the underground palace. This old man will apologize to the two of you. As the saying goes, no discord, no concord. Since your highness is going for the perplexing butterfly illusion as well, why don't you join forces with the Nether clan? Trust me, the Nether clan won't disappoint your highness. I hope your highness will reconsider. Long Fei Yi refused without hesitation. General Chu, I won't be seeing you out. General Chu had already made things so clear, but Long Fei Yi was still so adamant? General Chu was thoroughly stunned by the man's attitude. As soon as he left the Chamberlain of Dependencies, he went straight to find the Nether clan head. Once the Nether clan head understood the situation, he grew more and more confused as to what Long Fei Yi was planning. The more he tried to figure it out, the more curious, uneasy, and impulsive he became. One could say that Long Fei Ye's attitude had driven both a clan head and a clan head crazy. They didn't dare to sit around and wait for their deaths. That night, the two of them snuck into the Chamberlain of Dependencies to see Long Fei Yi. Would Long Fei Yi relent this time? Even Han Yunqi couldn't figure it out. Chapter 573. In the dead of the night, a clan head and clan head had climbed over the walls to find Long Fei Yi. What a fool. If news of this spread, the entire world would probably despise the Nether clan and Chu clan. Of course, if the world knew of Long Fei's noble status as a member of the imperial clan, this wouldn't be a big deal. After all, even the 7 noble families had to pay respects to members of the imperial clan during the Great Qin dynasty. Han Yunqi's identity had always been suspected, but no one had ever questioned Long Fei Ye's identity. Even the smartest of them all, Gu Beiwe, had never considered that possibility. If one day Gu Beiwe found out that Long Fei Yi was an enemy of Western Qin's imperial clan, how would he react? Currently, Gu Beiwe was still in Western Zhou. Unfortunately, he'd followed Chu Shifeng and Tang Li to Thousand Buddha Cave, so he wasn't in the city. Since the Nether clan head had climbed over the walls, Long Fei Yi naturally received him. Chu Yuni had been impulsive all night, but now he was calm and collected. Your Highness Duke of Qin, I've long heard of you. Long Fei arched a brow from his lofty position and only nodded. His arrogance made General Chu very unhappy. It was one thing for Long Fei Yi to look down on him, but he was still so frigid even when the head of the Nether clan was here. This brat has no manners at all. No manners at all. Still, Chu Yuni didn't get angry. He studied Long Fei Yi carefully. This was his first time seeing Long Fei Yi in person. Although he knew that this young man was noble and extraordinary, he didn't expect him to have such a powerful aura. Looking into his cold and deep eyes, the Nether clan leader felt a sense of awe that even he couldn't explain. Of course he knew that Long Fei Yi was from Tianning's imperial clan, but not even Emperor Kong Chung possessed such a natural sense of superiority. How could a mere Qinhuang of Long Fei Yi, who'd never even sat on the throne before, have such a feeling? Strangely enough, he could vaguely sense the hatred hidden in Long Fei Ye's eyes when he looked at him. After examining Long Fei Yi, Chu Yuni turned to Han Yunqi. He found the same feeling in Han Yunqi. Long Fei Ye's distinguished status was still acceptable, but Han Yunqi was merely the first daughter of the Han family. How could she be distinguished and not to be offended? Could it be that she had been with Long Fei for so long that her temperament had been cultivated? Chu Yuni's heart was filled with shock, but he had no time to dwell on the matter. He had to get things settled before daybreak and Long Fei's formal audience with Emperor Kongcheng. Duke of Qin, why don't we get straight to the point? Chu Yuni grinned. How can we help the Nether clan keep this secret? I'll have to trouble you to name your terms. Long Fei's refusal to meet General Chu was precisely to force the Nether clan head's hand. General Chu couldn't decide on his terms. Your lordship wants one thing. Long Fei finally spoke. What is it? Chu Yuni asked hastily. The wood of 10,000 poisons, Long Fei said directly. At this, Chu Yuni and General Chu realized that Chu Tianyin had leaked the secret. Both of them were surprised. Chu Yuni was fuming in his heart, while General Chu was worried about unnecessary anger. He understood his son all too well. Heaven knows how much torture he'd suffered to reveal such a secret. Everyone knew about the perplexing butterfly illusion, so Chu Yuni didn't bother to explain. He stroked his beard for a long time before replying, Duke of Qin, you know as well that it's not easy to enter the 1,000 Buddha cave. The 1,000-year ginkgo trees are even harder to get close to. How about we exchange? Before he could finish, Long Fei cut him off. Since the Nether clan can't do it, then please go back. You. General Chu lost his temper. Duke of Qin, the two of us came here with sincerity. What kind of attitude is this? Your lordship could have asked Emperor Kongcheng directly. I never had any intentions of negotiating with your Chu clan. I'm only giving you this chance because the Nether clan head came to visit so late at night. If the Nether clan can't do it, then I won't force you. Long Fei's tone was cold as ice. By his side, Han Yunxi subconsciously gathered her robes together. She felt cold and felt that something was off about Long Fei's attitude towards the Nether clan, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Was she too used to Long Fei's gentleness to get used to his coldness? Or was there another reason? Or perhaps her intuition was wrong. Han Yunxi was still lost in her thoughts when General Chu's sudden outburst woke her up. He pointed at Long Fei and cried, Duke of Qin, you're threatening us. He said he'd ask Emperor Kongcheng for help, but what else could he use besides the Chu clan secrets? Chu Yuni's expression was ugly as well. What else could he do now that he'd been forced into a corner? Even if he couldn't get his hands on the wood of 10,000 poisons, he had to figure out a way to get it. Duke of Qin, my Nether clan agrees. Please give the Nether clan some time. Chu Yuni agreed decisively. How long? Long Fei asked. 3 months. 3 months from now is Bodhisattva's birthday. The imperial concubines will all go to 1,000 Buddha Cave to pay their respects. That's the only time we have a chance, Chu Yuni replied honestly. Long Fei didn't think much of it, but nodded in agreement. 3 months. If you miss the deadline, don't blame your lordship for being impolite. Many thanks. Chu Yuni was very polite, but Long Fei's face was still cold and lofty. Chu Yuni could only accept the fact that he was being held back and had a favor to ask. Now that things were settled, he didn't want to stay and be bullied, so he turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Long Fei actually asked him to stay. Nether clan head, wait a moment. Your lordship still has something he doesn't understand and would like to ask for guidance. Please speak. Chu Yuni was natural and unrestrained, but as soon as Long Fei spoke, he couldn't hold back anymore. His face turned gloomy. Long Fei said, I heard you know the whereabouts of the D clan? General Chu grew even more alarmed. He knew that his son must have suffered a great deal at Long Fei's hands, or else he'd never tell him such a secret. Chu Yuni fell silent for a long time. So Long Fei asked next, is it still a merchant clan on the border between Western Zhou and Tianning? Old man only knows this much. With the Duke of Qin's skills, it shouldn't be hard for him to find the D clan, Chu Yuni replied. If we exchange the D clan's whereabouts for Chu Tianyin, why don't you consider it? Nether clan head? Long Fei asked. General Chu immediately recovered his wits, but Chu Yuni didn't say a word before storming off. General Chu chased after him and said in a rush, What do you mean? You're not going to save Tianyin? He was still waiting for Chu Yuni to talk terms with Long Fei to save Tianyin, But he never expected Long Fei to make the offer first. Nor did he expect Chu Yuni to leave without a second thought. It would have been better if General Chu hadn't asked, because his question only made Chu Yuni lose his temper. What's the use of saving a useless piece of trash who can't do anything right? General Chu lost his temper at those words and rushed to block Chu Yuni's way. Speak clearly. Old man gave him so many soldiers and set up such a tight ambush in the poison sect's underground palace. What did he give the old man in return? Not only did he fail to kill Long Fei, but he also exposed the Nether clan's secrets. Now, he even gave up information about the Wood of 10,000 Poisons and the D clan. Heh, you still want the old man to save him? Chu Yuni raged. Which Ant was present at the underground palace incident as well. Tianyin has already done his best. Everyone knows how much he's sacrificed for the Chu clan over the years. If not for him, my Chu clan would never have made friends with Crown Prince Yi. If not for him, my Chu clan's power would never have reached Western Liang. Everyone makes mistakes. You can't deny everything about Tianyin just because of a single mistake. General Chu lost his temper as well. Then tell the old man, what's up with the Wood of 10,000 Poisons? What's up with the D clan? Don't tell the old man that he wasn't the one who exposed these two things? Chu Yuni asked. They must have used capital punishment. Otherwise, with Tianyin's temper, he'd never expose any secrets. Moreover, he doesn't even know everything about the D clan, so how much can he tell us? Leaving aside Chu Tianyin, even Gu Beiwei didn't know much about the D clan. Big bro, those who want to achieve great things can't be soft-hearted. Especially at a time like this, we can't let Long Fei find out about the D clan. Whether it's for Tianyin's sake or for our grand scheme, we have to use the Shadow clan to distract him. Chu Yuni remained silent. Big bro, only you and I know about the D clan. Give us a clear explanation. General Chu pressed. Finally, Chu Yuni spoke up. Chapter 574. After General Chu fanned the flames again and again, Chu Yuni finally spoke up. I'll consider this matter carefully. Big bro, you still want to consider things at a time like this? Now's not the time to let your emotions get the better of you. You should know who's more important between the Shadow clan and the D clan. The Nether and Shadow clans were sworn friends of life and death, while the Nether and D clans had only known each other for less than 10 years. Still, the D clan was so powerful that even the Nether clan couldn't compare. Abandoning the D clan for the sake of a single Gu Beiwei was truly not worth the losses. Chu Yuni had long been tempted, but he still held onto old ties. If he can handle the matter of the Wood of 10,000 Poisons, then we'll drop the matter. At least we can delay the Duke of Qin. After all, the old man won 3 months' worth of time tonight. And if he can't handle it, General Chu insisted on an answer. Chu Yuni didn't hesitate. Cold, he said. If he's unjust, then don't blame my Nether clan for being heartless. Satisfied, General Chu said, All right, I'll send someone to find him tomorrow. When they returned to the Chu clan, they received news from Medical City. Lady Lianxin's invitation was completely unexpected because she'd actually invited Medical City's head elder Ling Yunchang. Chu Yuni rejoiced. Excellent, excellent. With head elder Ling personally making an appearance, there's no chance of anything going wrong. As long as Chu Qingge could give birth in 3 months' time, the Chu clan would have a way out. Then he'd be able to fight the Duke of Qin with all his might. He'd gone to see the Duke of Qin in the middle of the night for 2 reasons. 1, impulsive, and 2, to buy time. How could the Nether clan be willing to give up the Wood of 10,000 Poisons just like that? How could they let go of a formidable foe like the Duke of Qin? It was almost daybreak, but Han Yunxi and Long Fei were still wide awake. The Chamberlain of Dependencies had only prepared 1 room for them. Currently, the 2 of them were lounging lazily on the bed as they chatted. Who told you that the driving arrow art is a secret art of the fiends? Han Yunxi had been wondering about this for a long time. Long Fei sighed softly and tossed out the annals of the 7 noble families that he'd been carrying with him all this time. Before the matter with Mute Granny was resolved, he'd been avoiding Han Yunxi whenever he read this book because there were too many uncertainties. But now there was no need to hide it. Han Yunxi flipped through a few pages and was shocked. Where did this book come from? Who wrote it? The records of the 7 noble families in this book were very detailed, as if they had been specially researched. There was no doubt that this book could be traced back to the Great Qin dynasty. I don't know who wrote it, but I came across it by chance. Originally, I was just casually flipping through it. I didn't expect that there really was an arrow driving technique, Long Feiyi said indifferently. Actually, this book was secretly written by the East Qin royal family. In the past, the East Qin royal family already had the intention of winning over the nobles. Unfortunately, this book only came into use after it was written and passed down to him. Han Yunxi didn't think too much about it and searched for the records on the Shadow Clan. Unfortunately, the records on the Shadow Clan were the least. There was only a single page with only a few sentences. In summary, there were 2 points. The first was about the Shadow Clan's secret art, the Shadow Art. The Shadow Art wasn't an offensive martial art, but a defensive one. Its most powerful ability was teleportation. The second was about the Shadow Clan's protection. Han Yunxi had always known that the Shadow Clan's protection was for the Western Qin royal family, but she hadn't expected this book to record another kind of protection for the Shadow Clan. It was also to protect one's lover with their lives. She couldn't help but recall that elegant white figure. Ever since the disaster relief in Ningnan County, she hadn't seen that white-robed man again. Even after learning that her mother was a daughter of Medicine City's Mu clan and her father was a direct descendant of the Poison sect, Han Yunxi no longer suspected that she was related to the Western Qin royal family. However, she was still curious about the white-robed man. The royal family was destroyed, and the Shadow Clan was destroyed. The Shadow Clan's ancestral teachings. Could it be that the Western Qin royal family really has an orphan? Han Yunxi asked suspiciously. Not everyone will follow their clan's orders, Long Feiyi said indifferently. Han Yunxi felt that it made sense. However, whenever she thought of the white-robed man, she had an inexplicable feeling that he wasn't someone who would go against his clan's orders. She didn't know about the matter between the Nether and Shadow clans, nor did she know that Long Feiyi had already sowed discord today. She said indifferently, "The way I see it, this person can be a friend." She then added with a smile, "In any case, the little thing recognizes its master. He can't take it away even if he tries." A complicated look flitted across Long Feiyi's eyes, but he didn't say anything. Han Yunxi continued to flip through the pages until she reached the records of the D clan. The D clan was the money bag of the Western Qin royal family and were extremely loyal to the Western Qin royal family. The Nether clan killed the last imperial prince of the Western Qin royal family, while the D clan is the protector of the Western Qin royal family. In other words, the Nether and D clans are absolutely irreconcilable. Han Yunxi looked doubtfully at Long Feiyi. Logically speaking, the Nether and D clans shouldn't be in cahoots. From another perspective, if the Nether clan really knew the whereabouts of the D clan, they would have told Long Feiyi long ago. Why wait until Long Feiyi spoke up? Han Yunxi thought that Chu Tianin and Chu Yuni weren't lying. That's all they knew. But Long Feiyi only said cold, "Han Yunxi, remember this? People's hearts change. There's no such thing as eternal loyalty in this world, only eternal benefits. What's more important than anything else is a clan's mission, but its own benefits." That one sentence explained all the possibilities. The D clan was active on the borders between Western Zhou and Tianing, while the Chu clan controlled the border armies. It was entirely possible that the two were in cahoots. Han Yunxi looked up. "Long Feiyi, is there anything else that's eternal besides the clan's mission?" Long Feiyi didn't answer, but beckoned her over with a finger. Han Yunxi obediently crawled over to him and snuggled into his embrace. She assumed that Long Feiyi would answer her, but Long Feiyi only said, "Sleep for a bit. After morning court, it's time to enter the palace." He hadn't told the Chu clan to find the wood of 10,000 poisons just for the sake of the treasure. He still had to have a good chat with Emperor Kongcheng. How could Han Yunxi fall asleep? She reminded him, "Isn't 3 months a little too long? The Nether clan's been fighting for 3 months. If the Nether clan found a way out during that time, things would get out of hand. Western Liang won't belong to the Chu clan in 3 months. Don't worry," Long Feiyi said. Besides Chu Chinga's side, The Chu clan had no other way to protect themselves and form their own faction. Long Fei Yi had never mentioned it, but he'd been keeping tabs on the movements in Western Liang and Tian'an. 3 months later, Chu Qingge's child would be 7 months old. She wouldn't be able to get anything from Emperor Tianhui yet. Leaving aside Long Fei Yi, even Han Yunxi would never expect the Chu clan to give birth to Chu Qingge. Han Yunxi nodded her head, still quite relieved. Long Fei Yi gently patted her back and told her to rest. Han Yunxi couldn't sleep. Her eyes were wide open as she stared at him. Long Fei Yi glanced at her before leaning against her head and closing his eyes. In the silence of the room, the two of them slept in each other's arms. What a beautiful sight. After a long time, when Han Yunxi didn't stir, Long Fei Yi finally murmured, "Your lordship will treat you forever and ever." Actually, Han Yunxi wasn't sleeping at all. She'd heard everything clearly. Her lips quirked up into a smile. She wanted to pretend she hadn't heard a thing, but she couldn't help herself when faced with this man. She murmured back, I like you forever and ever too." In an instant, Long Fei Yi's smile froze. This woman was pretending to be asleep. Did this count as the first time they confessed their feelings to each other? Did this count as their first mutual promise? Or perhaps this was it. Han Yunxi was finally satisfied. She snuggled into a comfortable position in Long Fei Yi's arms and fell asleep peacefully. At this time, Emperor Kongcheng was already at morning court. The more he listened to the quarrel between the Eastern Palace and the anti-Crown Prince faction, the more annoyed he became. A few years ago, the Crown Prince's ruthless suppression of almost all of his opponents was part of the Emperor's plan. Otherwise, how could the Crown Prince have overthrown the major factions in court? Later on, as the Crown Prince and the Chu clan grew closer, Emperor Kongcheng began to grow wary and began to support other factions. He hoped that the various factions in court would be balanced so that the Chu clan wouldn't be nurtured as a threat. Crown Prince Yi and Princess Yao were the Empress's children, as well as Emperor Kongcheng's most beloved imperial son and princess. Unfortunately, Princess Yao had colluded with Junie Xie. Crown Prince Yi loved his sister too much and caused the farce yesterday, causing Emperor Kongcheng's heart to turn cold. Today's morning court was dismissed early. Emperor Kongcheng pondered what the Duke of Qin wanted to discuss with him today as he strolled through the inner palace. Before he knew it, he'd arrived at the Eastern Palace. Ever since the Crown Prince was grounded, the Eastern Palace had become much more deserted. Emperor Kongcheng walked in alone without an escort, so he kept a low profile. As soon as he entered, a young eunuch bumped into him. The eunuch looked up and was so shocked that he dropped the secret missive he was holding. "Your Majesty, please spare me. Your Majesty, please spare me. This servant knows his wrongs and won't dare do it again. Your Majesty, please spare me." The young eunuch was so shocked that he kowtowed again and again, his words almost incoherent. Emperor Kongcheng wasn't going to bicker with the young eunuch. He was about to leave when he saw a missive on the ground. Something like this that appeared in the Eastern Palace was most likely from Crown Prince Yi. Emperor Kongcheng immediately picked it up and opened it to see that it was from Crown Prince Yi to Princess Yao. The letter explained yesterday's events and expressed his hatred for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. He even said that he'd find another opportunity to avenge her. Yesterday's events had calmed Emperor Kongcheng's heart somewhat, but when he saw that Crown Prince Ye's letter was filled with resentment and only focused on helping Princess Yao, not only did he not reflect on himself, he even revealed his dissatisfaction with him as his imperial father. Anger flared in Emperor Kongcheng's heart once more, and he hurried inside. Duamu Bei didn't even have time to report his arrival before his imperial father came face to face with him. They were both in their early 20s and were both from the imperial clan. Duamu Bei had been doted on since he was young and received a much better education than Long Fei Yi. Why was there such a large gap between them? Although Emperor Kongcheng didn't want to admit it, he truly wanted to have a son like Long Fei Yi. Duamu Bei didn't even have time to react before Emperor Kongcheng smashed the missive into his face. "We must punish you today. Men, drag him out and flog him 30 times. At this time, someone stopped him from behind the curtains. Who was it? Chapter 575. Wait. A harsh and angry voice stopped Emperor Kongcheng. Who else but Western Zhou's Empress Shui dared to appear in the Eastern Palace and act so impudently in front of the Emperor? Firstly, Empress Shui was favored by Emperor Kongcheng, and secondly, her family was powerful and influential. She had ruled over the harem for so long that no one could compete with her. In the early years of Crown Prince Ye's ruthless battles to eliminate dissidents, she had also played a part. Before Empress Shui could walk out, Emperor Kongcheng shouted angrily, "Your Highness, it's all because you spoiled the Crown Prince." Hehe, Yao Yao was banished because I spoiled her anyway. I've already committed many crimes. This one won't make a difference. Empress Shui stubbornly walked out from behind the curtain. Unlike other empresses, this Empress Shui did not have a graceful and luxurious appearance, nor was she adorned with jewels. Although she was old, she still maintained her figure well. She wore a snow-white muslin dress inside and a gray-black fox fur robe outside. Time had left its mark on her face, but it did not take away her innate noble temperament. If not for the fact that she was in the imperial palace, anyone who saw her might mistake her for a fairy. Duanmu Yao's otherworldly temperament was inherited from her, but Duanmu Yao was even more ethereal and beautiful than her younger self. Guards, drag the crown prince out. Emperor Kongcheng was truly furious. If your majesty insists on flogging the crown prince, then please flog this concubine first. Empress Shui stood protectively in front of Crown Prince Yi, who also hid behind her and refused to come out. Emperor Kongcheng grabbed the secret letter and tossed it over. Look at what he's written. He's lost all face for Western Zhou, but he still hasn't reneged on his promise. He even dares to contact that damned girl. Does he really want us to cripple him? Your Majesty, this concubine had the Crown Prince write this letter. Please forgive the Crown Prince this time out of consideration for the fact that this concubine misses her daughter and the Crown Prince wants to protect his younger sister. As Empress Shui spoke, tears began to fall from her eyes. Your Majesty, Yao Yao, that girl, doesn't know any better. How could she stand up to that bastard Jun Ishia's coaxing? She was muddle-headed in a moment of folly and got tricked by a venomous woman like Han Yunxi in front of everyone. Now the whole world knows about it, and even now there are rumors that Yao Yao and Jun Ixia had an affair. Your Majesty, what was wrong with the Crown Prince hating Han Yunxi? Your Majesty, don't you feel sorry for your daughter? Emperor Kongcheng couldn't bear to see the Empress cry, so even his heart of stone melted at the sight of her tearful appearance. Enough, enough, let's not talk about this anymore. As he spoke, he turned to leave. I heard that Hongqing and Tianza horse farms have both fallen into the Crown Prince's hands? Emperor Kongcheng probed. He'd received news that the Duke of Kong, Jun Ixia, had a share of these two horse farms as well. But because of the Medicine City incident, Jun Ixia had been stripped of his position and power. No matter who it is, once the plague spreads, no one can do anything about it. Long Fei said indifferently, this prince received news not long ago that last year's horse plague also affected Tianza and Hongqing horse farms, but the losses weren't as great as Southern Li's. Emperor Kongcheng's heart skipped a beat. Although Long Fei had spoken tactfully, he understood everything. It seemed that Northern Li's losses were even greater than he'd expected. In other words, Northern Li's military strength wasn't as strong as he'd estimated. No wonder. With Tianning's internal strife, Great General Ning of the cavalry and General Mu of the infantry were split in two. The navy had retreated to the south, so Tianning's military strength in the north had been split in half. Northern Li had only lost one horse farm, but hadn't made any moves to the south. So it was because they'd suffered huge losses. What was the Duke of Qin's intention in revealing such a secret to him? If Tianning wasn't in chaos, this would be a good opportunity. Emperor Kongcheng sighed with emotion. Northern Li had always been the one to invade Tianning and Western Zhou's borders. If Tianning's infantry and cavalry could work together with Western Zhou, they could take advantage of Northern Li's lack of battle horses and attack them to their heart's content. If Western Zhou is interested, this prince can pull some strings and have General Bailey come over for a discussion, Long Fei said. Emperor Kongcheng finally understood why Long Fei had come. As it turned out, he really was here to cooperate with Western Zhou. If the Bailey Navy set out by sea to invade northern Li's borders, then they could join forces with Western Zhou to form a pincer attack that would make it difficult for northern Li to defend its east and west. Emperor Kongqing's first reaction was to be moved, but he was still rational enough to quickly analyze the pros and cons of this cooperation. Without a doubt, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. For one thing, joining forces with the Duke of Qin would mean tearing off all pretense of cordiality with Western Zhou. If that happened, the Ning clan cavalry stationed at the borders would take advantage of the chaos to invade Western Zhou. The consequences would be unthinkable. Secondly, even the most confident of winning a battle could be miscalculated. Western Zhou shared a border with Northern Li, so they'd run the risk of being invaded by Northern Li. Northern Li's cavalry held grudges and wouldn't hesitate to pay any price for offending them. Moreover, Long Fei didn't share a border with Northern Li and was even separated by Emperor Tianhui and his son. Thus, the Duke of Qin didn't have to take much risk. If he couldn't win, he could just withdraw his navy. Thirdly, and this was Emperor Kongqing's greatest fear, cooperating with the Duke of Qin was tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin, or even a fox for its skin. He'd never know how he'd fallen into a trap. Heaven knows if the Duke of Qin was sincerely trying to suppress Northern Li or scheme against Western Zhou. Emperor Kongqing's first thought was to reject the idea, but he still put on an expression of interest. After all, he still wanted to learn more about Northern Li from the Duke of Qin's mouth. Unfortunately, he didn't get any answers in the end. At first, the Duke of Qin spoke quite a bit, but by the end, it was just him doing all the talking while the Duke of Qin listened. Han Yunqi, who was sitting by the Duke of Qin's side, didn't say a word. She looked like someone who'd been left out to dry and bored, but the Duke of Qin kept pouring tea for her from time to time. Empress Shui couldn't help but feel jealous as she watched from the shadows. Even she, the country's favored empress, had to hide in the shadows to eavesdrop. Han Yunqi was only a Wang Fei, so what right did she have to sit on equal footing with the Duke of Qin and listen in on politics? Moreover, the Duke of Qin was pouring tea for her in front of everyone. No matter what, it should be Han Yunqi pouring tea for him instead. Although Cloud Realm Continent's customs were more civilized, this was still a world where men were considered superior to women. Men, especially those with power, might beg women in bed, but no one would wait on a woman like this in a formal setting. Yet the Duke of Qin had done it, and Han Yunqi had accepted it so calmly. The two of them seemed to have gotten used to it by now. Empress Shui was furious at the sight, to say nothing of her daughter. I have to tell Yao Yao about this and have her guard everything at Celestial Mountain. Even if she loses the marriage alliance and her status as princess, she can't let Han Yunqi get away so easily. Long Fei Yi and Emperor Kongqing chatted for less than 2 hours before agreeing to attend the banquet that night. Long Fei Yi took Han Yunqi out of the palace. As soon as they left, Han Yunqi blurted out, "You didn't really want to cooperate with Western Zhou, right? You came here on purpose to leak information about the plague." After following Long Fei Yi for so long and adding in her own intelligence, Han Yunqi had more or less figured out Long Fei Yi's schemes. "Keep going," Long Fei Yi said with interest. "So Emperor Kongqing will use the excuse of grounding the crown prince to make a move against the Chu clan," Han Yunqi said seriously. As the saying went, high merits overshadowed the master, but great power attracted disaster. No matter how magnanimous Emperor Kongqing was, he couldn't allow the Chu clan's power to grow without limit. Especially after Chu Qingge married Emperor Tianhui and became the empress within 2 years, Emperor Kongqing grew even more fearful of her. Emperor Kongqing had refrained from making a move against the Chu clan for 2 reasons. Firstly, he was observing the situation from the sidelines. Secondly, he was wary of the Northern Li cavalry. After all, the Chu clan's archers were the most formidable force in the Western Zhou army. They were a major force against the Northern Li cavalry. Han Yunqi grinned at Long Fei Yi. "Long Fei Yi, you're too evil. You came here to sow discord." Chapter 576. That's right. Long Fei Yi had come here to sow discord. Not only did he succeed in sowing discord between Emperor Kongqing and the Chu clan, but he'd also succeeded in sowing discord between the Chu clan and Gu Beiwe. Unfortunately, Han Yunshi only saw through the former, but not the latter. They'd just returned to the Court of Dependencies when Tang Li and Chu Shifeng returned from Thousand Buddha Cave. Big bro, it's impossible to sneak in without a guide. The security's too tight. There's a guard one Li outside the door. Tang Li was very certain. Chu Shifeng nodded. Master, even the Chu clan's men would have a hard time getting in. Aside from the tight security, there's also plenty of traps. If young Master Tang wasn't here, this subordinate would have startled the snake in the grass. Tang Li was not only an expert in assassination weapons, but also in mechanisms and traps. It was all thanks to Tang Li that they'd made the trip this time. Currently, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi were both silent. They both thought of the same person at the same time. The white-robed gentleman. Long Fei Yi mused that the Nether clan would probably ask the Shadow Clan man for help. Han Yunshi mused that it shouldn't be difficult for the Shadow Clan man to sneak in without alerting anyone. Unfortunately, neither of them knew what the other was thinking, nor would they say it out loud. Long Fei Yi said, "Let's wait for news from the Chu clan." Meanwhile, Gu Beiwe had just arrived at the Chu clan as well. He'd grown curious after Chu Yuni brought up the matter. He knew many things about the poison sect, including the perplexing butterfly illusion. He'd heard Chu Tianyin talk about the wood of 10,000 poisons, which meant the Chu clan had long known it was in Thousand Buddha Cave. Of all times, they'd stolen it when Long Fei Yi was here. Why? Could it be that Chu Yuni knew Long Fei Yi was here for the wood of 10,000 poisons, so he wanted to make the first move? Or perhaps they'd made some sort of deal. Gu Beiwe had a complicated look in his eyes as he asked, "Why are you looking for the wood of 10,000 poisons out of the blue? The one who strikes first gains the advantage. That damned brat Tianyi's already spread the news." Chu Yuni said hatefully. Gu Beiwe stared fixedly at Chu Yuni as if he could see right through his eyes. He asked again, "So the Duke of Qin came for the wood of 10,000 poisons?" "Exactly." Chu Yuni didn't speak. He had a favor to ask of Gu Beiwe, but he was also testing him. He lowered his voice. "North Moon, I won't hide it from you. Yesterday, the old man and the king of Qin met privately. He promised that as long as the Chu clan helped him get the wood of 10,000 poisons, he would help the Chu clan keep the Nether clan's secret." Gu Beiwe immediately asked, "What about Chu Tianyin?" "Ha, that stinking brat can even reveal the matter of the wood of 10,000 poisons. What's the use of old man saving him?" "Humph, my Nether clan doesn't keep traitors," Chu Yuni retorted coldly. Gu Beiwe fell silent. His clear eyes were no longer warm, but cold and solemn. He seemed to have turned into a different person, making it hard for anyone to offend him. Even Chu Yuni, who wanted to test him, didn't dare to meet his eyes. He couldn't see through him, much less guess what he was thinking. The longer Gu Beiwe remained silent, the more Chu Yuni felt guilty. Although he was an elder, he'd never underestimated this young man before him. He only secretly regretted that a child like this wasn't born in the Nether clan's Chu clan. It wasn't that Chu Yuni couldn't restrain himself, but that Gu Beiwe had been silent for too long. Chu Yuni spoke up again. "North Moon, the Thousand Buddha Cave is heavily guarded. Leaving aside the 1,000-year ginkgo trees, it's already difficult to even get close to the entrance of the caves. Old man only sought you out because he was caught between a rock and a hard place. The Nether clan's survival depends on a single word from you." Chu Yuni wasn't exaggerating. If the Nether clan couldn't get their hands on the wood of 10,000 poisons, then Long Fei Yi wouldn't spare them. But if they forced their way into the Thousand Buddha Cave, then the Chu clan wouldn't be able to stay in Western Zhou any longer. "Nether clan head, you're exaggerating," Gu Beiwe intoned. "North Moon, old man was just in a rush a few days ago. Don't fuss over it," the Nether clan head added. "I won't." Gu Beiwe's tone was still indifferent, without a trace of emotion. The Nether clan head knew it was useless to say more, so he fell silent as well. After a long time, Gu Beiwe finally spoke up. "Nether clan head, the Duke of Qin holds the Nether clan's weakness in his hands. Why didn't he talk to Emperor Kongcheng directly instead of finding the Chu clan?" Of course, Emperor Kongcheng had heard of the perplexing butterfly illusion as well, but he didn't know that the wood of 10,000 poisons was needed to break through it. Nor did he know that it was growing from the 1,000-year ginkgo tree. If the Duke of Qin was only here for the wood of 10,000 poisons, he'd be the most direct person to talk to Emperor Kongcheng. I'm afraid he has other plans for the Chu clan. What do you think? Chu Yuni probed. Gu Beiwen nodded. With this one strength, I can barely get into the 1,000 Buddha cave. But to get the 1,000-year ginkgo tree, I'm afraid. Chu Yuni cut him off. You only need to scout the way first. 3 months later, the doors to Buddha worship will open. General Chu will have his own ways to get in then, so you just need to follow him inside. As Chu Yuni spoke, he scooted closer and whispered in Gu Beiyue's ear. The gist of his words was that 3 months later, he would find a way to invite Long Feiyi into the 1,000 Buddha cave, so Gu Beiyue could use the chance to kill Long Feiyi. As for the wood of 10,000 poisons, he had his own ways to get it. Gu Beiyue's gaze grew complicated. He was about to speak when Chu Yuni added, and also, even if you can't kill the Duke of Qin, you have to kill Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi understands poisons, so old man will definitely let her in with him. Gu Beiyue's clear eyes turned cold at these words. Fortunately, he was looking down, or else Chu Yuni would have been alarmed. Gu Beiyue was still hesitating before he nodded his head. All right, this junior will definitely help you to the end. Chu Yuni rejoiced and invited Gu Beiyue to stay overnight at the Chu estate, but Gu Beiyue tactfully refused. He said he'd give him a map of the 1,000 Buddha cave in a few days. After Gu Beiyue left, General Chu emerged from the inner rooms. Aren't you afraid he'll tell on you after you told him that? What's there to be afraid of? Long Feiyi is someone who knows how to beat people at their own game. If he has designs on the Chu clan, then he'll beat us at our own game. This time, he forced my nether clan's hand, so don't blame us for being unscrupulous. We'll accompany him to the end. Chu Yuni was so decisive that he had to have other tricks up his sleeve. He was setting a trap for the Long Feiyi while probing Gu Beiyue. If Gu Beiyue didn't collude with the Long Feiyi, then he'd spare Gu Beiyue. But if Gu Beiyue really did collude with the Long Feiyi, then the Shadow Clan would be destroyed in 1,000 Buddha Cave. General Chu still didn't understand. Even if the Duke of Qin beat us at our own game, what can we do? Do you want to expose the Nether Clan? Chu Yuni smiled cold as he whispered into General Chu's ear. General Chu's expression shifted before he finally said, It's too risky. Yes, but the Nether Clan has no other way out. Chu Yuni said cold. Long Feiyi was plotting against the Chu clan, Gu Beiyue, and Emperor Kongcheng. The Chu clan was plotting against the Long Feiyi and Gu Beiyue. Emperor Kongcheng was plotting against the Chu clan. It was a quiet night. Everyone in White Town was asleep, but a storm was brewing. Who would be the biggest winner, and who would be the worst loser in this long, open, and secret struggle? The answer would be revealed in 3 months' time. After tonight's banquet, Emperor Kongcheng personally sent off Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi. He'd given them a clear answer from the morning's meeting and said that Western Zhou preferred peace and harmony. They'd never attack anyone of their own accord and refused to cooperate with the Long Feiyi. He even asked the second imperial prince to accompany them and invite the Long Feiyi's group to White City for sightseeing. Everything was within Long Feiyi's expectations, so he tactfully refused and said he'd leave the city tomorrow morning. Since they'd come for the wood of 10,000 poisons, how could they really leave? Early the next morning, General Chu came to see them off. After leaving White City, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi walked along the official road. After noon, they shook off their pursuers and turned west, heading toward 1,000 Buddha Cave. To the west of Western Zhou's imperial capital, White City, there was a mountain range called 1,000 Buddha Mountain. To the west of this mountain range was Western Zhou's largest desert, the Char Desert. To the east of the mountain range was Western Zhou's largest oasis, and White City was built on this oasis. 1,000 Buddha Cave was located at the foot of 1,000 Buddha Mountain. It was a huge cave with over 1,000 Buddha statues, hence its name. Western Zhou's imperial family had built a large number of temples and palaces around 1,000 Buddha Cave. Together with the cave, they were collectively known as 1,000 Buddha Cave. There was a 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree in front of the cave. In fact, it didn't belong to Western Zhou, but it was enclosed in the temple. It was also regarded as an auspicious object by the eminent monks, so it was also regarded by the imperial family as the protector of the nation. It was heavily guarded. Other than the monks, only the members of the imperial family lived in Thousand Buddha Cave. Unless it was a major ceremony, the temple's doors were never opened. Long Fei Yi and the others walked for 2 days before they arrived at a small town closest to Thousand Buddha Cave. This small town was called East Arrival Town. They had just settled down at the inn when someone else arrived. This person was none other than the long-lost Gu. Where have you been? What's the point of leaving without saying goodbye? Han Yunqi asked with disdain. Long Fei Yi thought that Gu was just talking in his sleep when they were on the roof that night. He silently drank his tea and didn't even spare Gu a glance. Gu's smile was brighter than the noon sun. He didn't care about Long Fei Yi's presence and teased Han Yunqi. What's wrong? Do you miss me, Chi brother? Han Yunqi's mouth twitched. She didn't know what to say. Long Fei Yi threw the teacup in his hand at him. Scram! Gu was already prepared for him and hurriedly dodged. He pulled out a large pile of poison from his sleeve and stuffed it into Han Yunqi's hands. Here, feed this to the little thing in one go. Han Yunqi quickly figured out what these poisons were. They were all highly toxic. She couldn't concoct many of them because the poisonous herbs needed were too rare. Who would have thought that this guy would be able to get his hands on a bunch of them? You want to look for these things? Han Yunqi asked suspiciously. Gu pulled out a few more medicinal pills. These are for you. They're also one-time use. Han Yunqi couldn't understand. She activated the detoxification system to check, but couldn't find any medicinal properties. She asked suspiciously, what are they for? At this moment, Long Fei Yi finally raised his head to look at her. For your brain. Aren't you in a coma every day? Gu said seriously. Han Yunqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at his travel-worn appearance, her heart suddenly warmed. At this moment, Long Fei Yi suddenly snatched the medicine from her hand. To the readers, the gift-giving event has begun. Follow Mo's public WeChat account, Jimomo 2015. Chapter 577. Long Fei Yi snatched the pill from Han Yunqi's hand and looked at it. Gu immediately ridiculed. What are you looking at? You won't be able to understand it. Whoosh! With a cold hiss, the pill in Long Fei's hand flew into Gu Qixiao's open mouth. Gu Qixiao didn't even have time to react before he swallowed it whole. He grabbed the water on the table and drank a few mouthfuls before swallowing the huge pill. Long Fei Yi, your mother. Gu was obviously a devastatingly beautiful person, but when he cursed, he was actually very manly and didn't make people feel disgusted at all. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, but picked up the teacup again. Gu was immediately on guard. Han Yunqi rolled her eyes and quietly retreated. She still couldn't believe that these two fellas would collude. No, it should be that she couldn't believe that these two fellas would work together. Han Yunqi had just reached the door when she heard a series of crackling sounds in the room. She felt that she shouldn't waste her time with these two fellas and should find a quiet place to cultivate. Ever since she obtained the secret cultivation manual from the poison storage space, she had been quietly working hard. Many times, she didn't sleep at night and cultivated through the night. Fortunately, she was cultivating her mental strength, so she only needed to concentrate and gather qi. It didn't require much strength, and she wasn't too tired. Now, she was very free and effortlessly took in and out some common poisons like the water of 10,000 poisons, perplexing butterfly illusion, and Lil Thing. It was still a little difficult to take them out and put them in, especially Lil Thing. So, she secretly used Lil Thing to train. She would summon it out one moment, and then recall it the next. Lil Thing was lazy and at first, it let her do as she pleased. But after a few times, it got angry and bared its fangs at her to show its dissatisfaction. See, when Han Yunqi just summoned it out, it would grin and hum. Those sneaky little eyes became cross-eyed. Without a choice, Han Yunqi simply closed her eyes and focused on cultivating, ignoring it completely. Lil Thing was nothing but a paper tiger in front of its Mama Yunqi. When it saw that Mama Yunqi was ignoring it, it wilted on its own. It wanted to hide on Mama Yunqi's body and go back to sleep, but as soon as it jumped on top of her, it smelled the scent of poison. It was a poison it hadn't tasted before. The lazy Lil Thing immediately perked up and dove into Mama Yunxi's sleeve to find the poison. All these years, it had been hiding in the poison storage space and drinking the water of 10,000 poisons. It was getting sick of it and could finally have a change of taste. There was a total of 3 portions of the poison. It swallowed the first 2 portions in one gulp, but it couldn't bear to eat the last portion. It nibbled on the poison bit by bit and tasted it carefully. And it was precisely because of this careful tasting that it finally realized that something was wrong. The poison was mixed with something it was familiar with, but it couldn't remember what it was. Lil Thing tasted it carefully again. It was not until it finished the last portion of poison that it remembered what it was. Gu's blood had been mixed into the poison. When Mama Yunxi had been kidnapped by the crossbowman, it had noticed that something was wrong with Gu's blood. The white-robed man had noticed it as well, but Lil Thing had no idea what the white-robed man had appraised the blood as. It wasn't certain either, but it felt that the poison blood was very similar to the poison in its own teeth. It was very likely that it was the Gu blood from the water of 10,000 poisons, but it also seemed a little different. But it had never encountered real Gu blood before, so it couldn't get a definite answer. It only knew that no matter what kind of blood it was good stuff. It was very beneficial for its body's recovery and was 100 times more effective than other poisons. Wait a minute. Where did Mama Yunxi get these poisons? Could it be that Gu gave them to her? Did Gu want to help it recover faster? Thinking up to here, Lil Thing quickly squirmed out of its sleeves and chirped at Mama Yunxi. Unfortunately, Mama Yunxi was immersed in her mental cultivation and didn't hear it. Lil Thing felt that Gu must have been beaten stupid by Papa Long. If it was me, I wouldn't give up my poison blood so easily. It'd hurt my body and waste my inner chi. At the same time, Long Fei Yi and Gu had long stopped their senseless bickering in a nearby room. If they really wanted to fight, how could they make such a small commotion? After confirming that Han Yunxi had left, Long Fei Yi fell silent for a while before asking cold, "Is there no way to break the undying body?" He'd been wanting to ask this question ever since Gu left that night. "There isn't," Gu replied. He joked with Han Yunxi before, but it was really just a joke. There was no cure for him in this lifetime. Then why did you keep investigating Han Yunxi's origins in the past? Long Fei Yi was always clear-headed and rational. Even after forming an alliance with Gu, he wouldn't forget this question. "I wanted to confirm whether or not she was the poison woman, so I could use her to ally with the poison sect against the medical academy." This was indeed Gu's original plan. Long Fei Yi smiled coldly. He was about to speak when Gu beat him to it. "Hee, why don't you think this old man is willing to part with it?" Once he exposed Han Yunxi's identity as the poison woman, then Han Yunxi would become public enemy number 1. Long Fei didn't like it, nor did he like discussing women with a man, especially when it came to Han Yunxi. "Cold," he said, "you'll never have the chance in this lifetime." So speaking, he rose to leave, but Gu Qixiao stopped him and handed him a bottle of pills. "These really are good for nourishing the brain and nourishing the spirit." Seeing that Long Fei Yi was about to refuse, Gu relented. "She won't take them. Just say that you found them." Would Long Fei Yi want them? Definitely not. This prince will take good care of her body. You don't need to worry. Cold, he tossed these words. "Long Fei Yi, you've got guts. You better protect her for the rest of her life. Don't give this old man any chances, or I won't be polite." Gu said icily. Long Fei Yi didn't reply. Instead, he kicked a pebble over his head and aimed it at Gu. Gu dodged to the side, and the pebble smashed a hole in the door. Gu snorted disdainfully. It wasn't until he saw Long Fei Yi's figure disappear at the end of the courtyard that he suddenly remembered something important. He'd made a trip to the medical academy and inadvertently learned something. Gu quickly caught up with Long Fei Yi, but Long Fei Yi went to find Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi saw them coming one after the other. How could she cultivate? She felt gloomy in her heart. Can't she even stay in one corner? But Gu said something unexpected. The head of Medical City's Council of Elders, Head Elder Ling Yun and Lady Lianxin, went to Xijing. Long Fei Yi was stunned. Who asked them to save Tianhui? Long Fei Yi could only guess that this was the reason. If Tianhui's condition improved, then the Chu clan's path of retreat would be cut off. But Gu gave him an even more unexpected answer. Do you think the people invited by the Chu clan will save Tianhui? Gu might have left Medical City for years, but he could still find plenty of confidential information here. Chu Chinga's stomach? Long Feiyi immediately understood. Chu Chinga's only 4 months old. What could they do? Han Yunxi couldn't figure it out either. If they wanted Chu Chinga to give birth to a baby boy, they could just raise one instead. Why go through all the trouble of inviting head elderling over? If the Chu clan could invite head elderling, then it had to be Lady Lianxin who pulled strings. Leaving aside everything else, Han Yunxi was certain that this matter was directed at them. After all, Lady Lianxin was worried that she'd never get a chance to take revenge on them. Gu couldn't figure it out either. A 4-month-old baby couldn't be used for experiments anymore. What else could head elderling want with him personally showing up? It didn't seem likely that slut Lianxin would be able to get head elderling to show up with her looks alone. Find Gu Beiwei and ask him, he said carelessly. Right, send an urgent message back to ask him. Han Yunxi added hastily. A complicated look flickered past Long Feiyi's eyes, but he quickly agreed. But he didn't send a letter back to Pill Fiend Pharmacy, but sent someone to ask Third Elder Shan Jueming in Medical City. He had Chu Shifeng continue to track down Gu Beiwei's whereabouts. Not long after they left, Gu Beiwei left Pill Fiend Pharmacy as well. He went to the other branches, but Chu Shifeng couldn't find him anywhere. Long Feiyi was very curious to know where he was right now. Gu had planned to stay in Medical City for a few more days, but when he heard that Long Feiyi's group had gone to Thousand Buddha Cave, he came over. Medical City wasn't far from here. Han Yunxi told him about the wood of 10,000 poisons, leaving him both happy and puzzled. It's growing on a 1,000-year ginkgo tree? That's a poison. So how could it grow alongside the tree? Han Yunxi couldn't figure it out either. Unfortunately, she hadn't seen what the ginkgo tree looked like, so she couldn't figure out the reason. Moreover, she wasn't sure if she could activate her poison storage space to take in the wood of 10,000 poisons once she saw the tree. She'd have to see the thing to find out the answer, but how could it be so easy? Gu looked towards Long Feiyi. Shall we go scout the area tonight? Long Feiyi had agreed. He and Han Yunxi had settled down in this small town for 2 reasons. 1, to keep an eye on Western Zhou and the Chu clan's movements, and 2, to learn more about Thousand Buddha Cave. He was looking forward to Emperor Kongcheng making a move against the Chu clan in the next 3 months. He also wanted to see what the Chu clan would do when Duanmu Bei's ban was lifted and the Bodhisattva's birthday was opened. Of course, he was also waiting for Third Elder Shen's reply. He refused to believe that the Chu clan would submit so easily to his threats. In the end, Western Zhou wasn't a place where he could stay for long. It would take more time and patience to stir up the waters. After discussing business, Han Yunxi excused herself and had the shadow guard Su Donglin deliver a letter to Pill Fiend Pharmacy. Naturally, this letter was meant for Mu Ling-er. Gu had finally returned. She could finally answer to Mu Ling-er. She wondered if Mu Ling-er would cry tears of joy when she received the news. That night, Long Feiyi, Gu, and Tangli went to Thousand Buddha Cave together. Although they passed through the main entrance, they didn't go very far. The further they went, the more guards there were. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, they had no choice but to retreat. A few days later, news came from Y-Town that someone had reported the Chu clan for misappropriating military funds. Emperor Kongcheng ordered a strict investigation and prohibited General Chu from leaving Y-Town until the matter was resolved. There was no doubt that Emperor Kongcheng had begun to take action. Long Feiyi originally thought that the Chu clan would be overwhelmed with work. Who would have thought that 2 months later, the Chu clan's response not only surprised Long Feiyi, but also shocked all of Western Zhou? What had the Chu clan done? Even if the Chu family can retreat to the western capital, aren't they afraid that the Fiend clan will be exposed? Han Yunxi couldn't figure it out. She felt that something was wrong. They had something on the Chu family. No matter what, they wouldn't dare to trick them. Once his identity as a member of the Nether clan was exposed, the nobles who supported Western Qin would most likely come knocking on his door for revenge. Furthermore, the various powers of Cloud Realm continent wouldn't allow such a noble family to continue growing. How could the Nether clan withstand their combined suppression? Indeed, they don't have the capital to trick us, Tang Li muttered to himself. At this moment, one of the guards arrived with an urgent message from the Nether clan head, Chu Yuni. Long Fei Yi opened it and skimmed through it before handing it to Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't say a word after reading it, but handed it to Gu instead. Gu had only read half of it when he exclaimed, "That's strange." Indeed, it was strange. After thoroughly pissing off Emperor Kongcheng, the Chu clan had even written a letter stating that they'd be able to enter Thousand Buddha Cave on the 19th of November. They only needed Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's help to get the wood of 10,000 poisons. What's going on? Han Yunxi asked. We're not replying, Long Fei Yi intoned. They really didn't reply to Chu Yuni's letter. But a few days later, they received news that Empress Shui had donated all of her cosmetic money to the various soldiers. She was willing to enter Thousand Buddha Cave to pray for Buddha for 3 years and pray for Emperor Kongqing and the people of Western Zhou. She begged the emperor to give Crown Prince Yi another chance to turn over a new leaf. The imperial uncle Shui clan also took out a large sum of silver to donate, along with Empress Shui's cosmetic money to plead leniency for the crown prince. Emperor Kongcheng had always wanted to protect the crown prince, so he used this chance to agree to Empress Shui's request and delay the matter for a year. At the same time, Emperor Kongcheng cut the Chu clan's archery squad's pay by half on the pretext of not reporting the truth and aiding the tyrant. This was a huge step in keeping the Chu clan in check. Most likely, Emperor Kongcheng would make his move next spring after the new year. At this moment, Chu Yuni sent another letter saying that there was no need to wait until the 19th of the month. The Empress's visit to Thousand Buddha Cave on the last day of the month was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Along with the letter was a map of the Thousand Buddha Cave's layout. The Chu clan does have some weight after all. Gu chuckled. There's still 5 days. Han Yunxi was lost in thought. They still haven't found Gu Beiwe? It was Chu Shifeng who replied with a shake of his head. Han Yunxi had no time to find out where Gu Beiwe had gone, either. With 5 days left, they had to make a decision quickly. Follow the Chu clan into Thousand Buddha Cave, or refuse. She looked at Long Fei Yi and waited for his decision. Long Fei Yi fell silent before he replied, I won't reply for now. Then he added, Your lordship thought we'd be staying in Western Zhou for a long time, but it looks like there's no need. Han Yunxi and Gu exchanged glances, unsure of what Long Fei Yi meant. Han Yunxi knitted her brows in thought. As for Gu, he was too lazy to rack his brains. In any case, he was dealing with the Chu clan for the sake of the wood of 10,000 poisons, so he'd have to get involved. Let Long Fei Yi waste his time on brainstorming. That night, Long Fei Yi asked Chu Shifeng again. Third Elder Shan still hasn't replied? He sent a letter saying there's something fishy going on, but he doesn't dare to jump to conclusions. He needs more time to think things over, Chu Shifeng replied. The Chu clan's recent actions had been strange, so there had to be a trap. But his master still hadn't expressed his stance, so Chu Shifeng had no idea whether he'd go or not. If he went, he might fall into a trap. If he didn't, he'd miss a golden opportunity and have a harder time entering Thousand Buddha Cave in the future. Long Fei Yi didn't say much, but stayed up all night to watch over Han Yunxi and stare blankly at the map of Thousand Buddha Cave. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. 3 days later, there were only 2 days left until the Empress's Buddha ceremony, but the Chu clan still hadn't received a reply from the Duke of Qin. This time, Chu Yuni was able to keep his cool and didn't send a letter to inquire further. How's Witch Aunt doing? He asked. The baby will definitely be born by the end of next month. Everything's fine, General Chu replied. Hee, Duke of Qin. You're the one who's pushed people too far. Don't blame my Nether clan for pushing you too far. Chu Yuni laughed coldly. Chu Yuni still hadn't received a reply from Long Fei Yi until the day before the Empress's Buddha ceremony. But that very night, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi appeared in the Chu estate courtyard. General Chu was startled before he rejoiced. Hee, Your Highness Duke of Qin. The clan head's been waiting for ages. As soon as Chu Yuni saw Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, his first words were, Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei. Will we be traveling together tomorrow? Your lordship wants to know if there's a need for that? Your lordship is guarding your nether clan's secret, but the nether clan head wants your lordship and Wang Fei to help steal the wood of 10,000 poisons. Your nether clan isn't the D clan, so aren't you a little too good at doing business? Long Fei mocked. Chu Yuni sighed helplessly. Your Highness Duke of Qin, you know how difficult it is to enter Thousand Buddha Cave. For the sake of getting in early, my Chu clan even offended Emperor Kong Chung to death. What do you mean by that? Long Fei asked. Han Yunshi sat silently on one side, curious as well. Your Highness Duke of Qin, have you seen the map old man sent over? Chu Yuni asked. Long Fei took it out. I've seen it. Your Highness Duke of Qin, take a look at the location of the Guanyin Cave. Then look at the location of the 1,000-year ginkgo tree, Chu Yuni said. Long Fei glanced over and saw that the two locations were very far apart. The ginkgo tree was at the foot of the mountain, while the Guanyin Cave was almost halfway up the mountain. Your Highness, old man only gave up on Guanyin's birthday because he got his hands on this map. Guanyin's birthday is to pray to Guanyin, so Thousand Buddha Cave will open its western gate, which is the furthest from the ginkgo tree. This time, esteemed Empress will be praying to Buddha at Thousand Buddha Cave, right behind the ginkgo tree. To enter the cave, one has to pass through the ginkgo altar. As soon as Chu Yuni finished, General Chu added, Your Highness Duke of Qin, the Chu clan even chopped down a big tree like Crown Prince Yi for the sake of allowing esteemed Empress to pray to Buddha. For the sake of the Chu clan's sincerity, why don't you give them a hand? Moreover, if the Chu clan fails this time, you won't get anything out of it, either, right? So the Chu clan had exposed Crown Prince Yi for embezzling military funds, just so they could force the Empress to pray to Buddha? Han Yunshi had long heard of Western Zhou's imperial clan's custom of praying to Buddha to atone for their sins. It made sense that the Chu clan was using this method to force the Empress to do so. However, her intuition told her that there was still something wrong with this. But this time, she couldn't figure it out. She glanced at Long Fei, only to see him nodding his head. Your lordship was still puzzling over why the Chu clan chopped down a big tree like the Crown Prince. Weren't they afraid that Emperor Kongqing would cut them down next year? So that's why. Long Fei grinned. Compared to the secret of the Nether clan, we can only sacrifice the Chu clan's military power. Chu Yuni sighed. A sinister look flashed past his eyes. Hearing the Duke of Qin's words, he knew that his suspicions had been dispelled. As expected, Long Fei asked, What are the arrangements for tomorrow? An old mama will accompany the Empress to Thousand Buddha Cave to pray to Buddha. She's one of our Chu clan's spies, so she'll arrange for all the servants to accompany her. When the time comes, we'll have to trouble Qin Wang Fei to disguise herself as a servant girl. As for the Duke of Qin, we'll have to ask you to condescend to be one of the guards. Old man, General Chu, and a few of the Chu clan's expert archers will also accompany you in disguise. Once we enter Thousand Buddha Cave, Chu Yuni pointed at the map and explained in detail the arrangements for tomorrow's trip to Thousand Buddha Cave. The gist of it was that they'd create a disturbance to draw away everyone's attention while they worked together to help Qin Wang Fei find and steal the wood of 10,000 poisons. Han Yunshi listened in astonishment. The Chu clan had actually planted a spy by Empress Shui's side. She felt that the plan was quite thorough, but her instincts told her that it wasn't very reliable. Although time was tight, she felt that Long Fei wouldn't agree so easily. But Long Fei didn't ask any questions and simply agreed. He even agreed to spend the night at the Chu clan, so it'd be easier for them to move together tomorrow. Han Yunshi didn't say a word until they were back in their rooms. Then she murmured, Long Fei, are you really going? Long Fei said, I'm going. What would happen tomorrow? Chapter 579. Early next morning, Gu and Tang Li received news from Long Fei that he and Han Yunshi would be sneaking into Thousand Buddha Cave with the Chu clan. They were to wait outside and await orders at any time. Await orders at any time? Hee. Gu laughed coldly. You can choose not to go. Tang Li's face was full of disdain. If his big bro didn't like someone, then he didn't like them either. Unexpectedly, Gu had poisoned him with a single wave of his hand. Tang Li hadn't noticed at first, but Gu ignored him. He assumed that Gu had nothing to say and was about to mock him when he realized he couldn't make a sound. This was the same feeling he'd felt when Han Yunshi had poisoned him last time. Tang Li immediately shot his weapons at Gu, but they were flung aside by a thorny vine before they could reach Gu. If this old man doesn't show off his power to your master, do you think this old man's a sick cat? Gu Qixiao's voice was cold. Although he was all smiles in front of Han Yunshi and looked easy to talk to, he was actually an extremely petty man who held grudges. He couldn't afford to suffer any losses. Gu knew that Tang Li was the young head of the Tang clan, but he'd only called him a servant. Actually, the entire Tang clan counted as Long Fei Ye's servants. But when had Tang Li, the precious young head of the Tang clan, ever been called a servant? 10 different types of weapons appeared on his fingers as he prepared to fight Gu to the death. Chu Shifeng almost fell to his knees at the sight of the two men at daggers drawn. Why are they still arguing at a time like this? You two, can't you do me a favor? Are you going to Thousand Buddha Cave or not? If you're not going, I'll go myself. Chu Shifeng turned to leave as soon as he finished speaking, but Gu wasn't going to argue with Tang Li. In this world, other than Long Fei Yi, other than women, other than Han Yunshi, he didn't really care about anyone else. He immediately followed. Tang Li opened his mouth to call for Chu Shifeng to stop, but couldn't make a sound. Gloomily, he missed a few of his needles. Gu, just you wait. Once this matter with the wood of 10,000 poisons is over, this young master will turn you into a hedgehog. Gu's group of 3 arrived at the Thousand Buddha Cave and waited for a long time before they saw Empress Shue's grand procession. After all, the Empress was the Empress. She was extravagant and had many people following her. Because Qin Wang and the others had said that they would blend in with the honor guards and enter Thousand Buddha Cave, Gu and the other two hid in the shadows and opened their eyes wide to search. Helplessly, he just couldn't find a familiar face in the crowd. Because the weather was cold and windy, the court ladies and attendants were all wrapped in thick scarves and hats. Their heads were bowed, making it difficult to recognize their faces. Because it was winter, its leaves and branches had long withered away. Though the tree's crown was nowhere to be seen, its trunk and main branches were clearly visible. From a distance, it looked like a wooden stele towering between heaven and earth, simple and mysterious in appearance. A ring of short shrubs surrounded the ginkgo tree. It was unknown what species they were, but they were still lush and luxuriant even in this season of withering vegetation. The Empress's entourage was currently passing through the lush forest to enter Thousand Buddha Cave. Everyone had to walk, including Empress Shui. As she walked, she suddenly stopped and turned to look at the ginkgo tree in the distance. No matter who it was, they couldn't help but look back when they passed by. The 1,000-year-old tree was even more awe-inspiring than the Buddha in the cave. It had a kind of magic that made people stop and look up to it, kneel down and worship it. As soon as Empress Shui stopped, the people in front and behind her stopped as well. In front of her were the monks of the cave, while behind her were a dozen or so eunuchs and court ladies. Behind them were a dozen or so guards. Chu Yuni had mixed himself into the ranks of the guards, but he wasn't part of the group at the back. Instead, he stayed close to Empress Shui as her personal bodyguard, with only 2 or 3 people between them. Standing to his right was a tall guard with a full beard. His head was bowed the entire way, making it impossible to see his features clearly. On his left was a court lady with a thick scarf that covered her nose and half her face. Her head was bowed as well. Not far behind Chu Yuni was another guard. He looked rather thin and weak, and his face was covered in a full beard. He was staring at Chu Yuni the entire time. It's that tree on the right. Don't be fooled by how empty this stone altar looks. According to Old Man's investigations, there are 3 high monks with high martial arts standing guard here. Without Emperor Kongcheng's command token, even Empress Shui can only watch from a distance. Chu Yuni murmured, "When are you planning to make your move?" The tall guard on the right asked cold. Before Chu Yuni could answer, Empress Shui suddenly fell to her knees and bowed towards the ginkgo tree. In a flash, the monks and the guards behind them all followed suit. Chu Yuni's eyes flashed craftily before he rose to his feet. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, If you don't destroy the 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree now, when will you? So speaking, he shoved the tall guard next to him aside. At the same time, all of the archers hidden in the crowd rose to their feet. The old mama by Empress Shue's side was the first to grab the Empress to her feet and choke her with one hand. Empress Shue's mind went blank as she screamed, "Ah!" Chapter 580. There's an assassin. Someone come. Ah, there's an assassin. Empress Shue still didn't know what was going on, but began to cry out in fear. The monks and real servants began to shout as well, throwing the scene into chaos. That's Tianix's Duke of Qin. He's going to destroy the 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree. Heavens! Tianix's Duke of Qin has snuck in. Tianix's Duke of Qin is colluding with an assassin. Guards, hurry and summon the guards. Chu Yuni grabbed Empress Shue from the old mama's hands and warned the crowd, "Don't move, or else I'll kill the Empress." Empress Shue was scared witless. She didn't even dare to scream, never expecting such a thing to happen. Meanwhile, the crowd had all grown quiet from Chu Yuni's fierce aura. Only now did everyone take a closer look at the disguised Chu Yuni. Very soon, someone recognized him. That's the Chu clan's eldest son. How? Heavens, he's General Chu's older brother and eldest young Master Chu's uncle. I saw him once in the palace. It's definitely him. That's General Chu's older brother. The Chu clan is colluding with the Duke of Qin. The Chu clan is going to rebel. The crowd cried out in shock, but Chu Yuni's icy glare silenced them all. None of them dared to make a move. As for the tall guard, he was still wearing a full beard. If Chu Yuni hadn't called him Your Highness Duke of Qin, no one would have recognized him. Although he'd been pushed aside, he didn't move. Meanwhile, the court lady by Chu Yuni's side was already standing by his side. Is this what you meant by stirring up trouble? The Nether clan head is truly unexpected. The tall guard chuckled coldly. While they were speaking, the reinforcements had surrounded them. All of the disguised archers also stepped out to surround Chu Yuni and the rest for protection. Most of the people who'd rushed over were stunned by the sight of the Empress being kidnapped. They knew it was hopeless and could only surround them, not daring to act rashly. A few of the guards had already slipped away to ask for reinforcements and report to Emperor Kongcheng. Chu Yuni saw them leave, but he didn't stop them. In any case, he wasn't afraid of Emperor Kongcheng finding out. Duke of Qin, the Chu clan can't stay in Western Zhou any longer. Kidnapping the Empress is the best choice. If you want the wood of 10,000 poisons, hurry up and get it. Empress Shue is in the old man's hands. The senior monk guarding the altar won't dare to do anything. Once you get the wood of 10,000 poisons, old man will withdraw. Chu Yuni coaxed. All right. The tall guard grabbed the palace maid beside him, turned around, and flew towards the ginkgo tree. At the same time, Chu Yuni said coldly to the man behind him, Beiwe, go kill them. Yes. Gu Beiwe had disguised himself as well, appearing behind Chu Yuni's back as the thin, bearded man. Seeing the two figures flying towards the 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree, Gu Beiwe did not move. Instead, he said in a low voice, What's the hurry? The monk guarding the altar hasn't appeared yet. Hee, all right. No rush. Chu Yuni grinned craftily. Although all of 1,000 Buddha Cave's guards had surrounded them, Chu Yuni could still afford to wait. With Empress Shue in his hands, what was there to be afraid of? Even if news of their arrival spread and attracted more guards, he wasn't afraid. He had already made arrangements long before they came to 1,000 Buddha Cave, so the Chu estate had long been deserted. Emperor Kongcheng would be facing a mutiny very soon, so he had no time to focus on 1,000 Buddha Cave. Today, he was determined to kill Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi, so he could get his hands on the wood of 10,000 poisons. Soon enough, the three senior monks guarding the ginkgo tree flew in from different directions to surround Long Fei Ye's group and block their way out. All three of them had raised eyebrows and looked like fiends. Although they were monks, their bodies were filled with a murderous aura. Very soon, they began to attack Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi held his sword in one hand, while protecting Han Yunqi with the other. He dodged the attacks of the three experts like a line. Gu Beiwe watched with a complicated look in his eyes. He felt like something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He was about to take a closer look when Chu Yuni dragged Empress Shui over with a cold laugh. Esteemed Empress, do you want these three to withdraw obediently? Or, Chu Yuni didn't lower his hand, but took a hairpin from Empress Shui's hair and pressed it against her face. Don't. Empress Shui was scared out of her wits. Don't. Ah. All of the guards were watching. Even the three senior monks were staring at Empress Shui as they fought Long Fei Yi. This otherworldly, fairy-like empress actually had such a soul-stirring side to her. It had to be said that it was especially ugly. Chu Yuni knitted his brows and took the hairpin away before Empress Shui quieted down. Hurry and tell them to withdraw. Chu Yuni lost his patience. Stop. I'm ordering you all to stop. Did you hear that? All of you withdraw. Empress Shui cried and screamed until her makeup was ruined. She looked like a ghost. The three senior monks were very unhappy. They could tell that Tianning's Duke of Qin only had an undeserved reputation. What's this about being Tianshan Kinzo's most outstanding disciple? His martial arts skills were only SOSO. If they were given a little more time, they'd definitely be able to take both of them down. Withdraw. Do you hear me? I'm ordering you all to withdraw. Empress Shui shouted. Without a choice, the three senior monks resentfully sheathed their swords and retreated to one side. Your Highness Duke of Qin, the 1,000-year ginkgo tree is a sacred object of Buddhism. You can't afford to be so impudent. Duke of Qin, why do you have to involve Buddhism in your grudges with Western Zhou's imperial clan? Aren't your actions a bit lacking in style? Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi allowed the three senior monks to berate them, but remained indifferent. Everyone watched as they continued to approach the 1,000-year ginkgo tree. Soon enough, Long Fei Yi landed beneath the tree with Han Yunxi in his arms. Watching their backs, Chu Yuni laughed coldly. Beiwe, this is a good chance. While they're searching for the wood of 10,000 poisons and distracted, Gu Beiwe could sneak up on them with lightning speed and succeed for sure. Gu Beiwe's eyes drooped before he replied, wait a bit longer. It won't be too late to make a move after Han Yunxi finds the wood of 10,000 poisons. Hearing this, Chu Yuni had a better idea of the situation. He retorted, can you deal with Long Fei Yi with your strength? If you don't use this chance to sneak up on him, where do you find the confidence to take his life? With your skills, can you touch the wood of 10,000 poisons from the 1,000-year ginkgo tree? Gu Beiwe retorted. Naturally, Chu Yuni had brought his own poison masters with him, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he kept probing. Even if Old Man doesn't want the wood of 10,000 poisons, he'll still kill Long Fei Yi. Beiwe, are you going to go or not? As Chu Yuni finished speaking, he turned back to stare at Gu Beiwe. Gu Beiwe didn't dodge, but he had no more excuses to delay. Just as he was about to capture Chu Yuni, the man suddenly backed away and shot an arrow at him. Chu Yuni's archery skills were the best among the Nether clan. If not for Gu Beiwe's speed, the arrow would have hit him right in the heart. Gu Beiwe was alarmed. He never expected Chu Yuni to take him seriously one day. Gu Beiwe had only been distracted for a moment before multiple archers surrounded him. Although none of them were holding arrows, Gu Beiwe found it hard to believe that these archers had been personally trained by Chu Yuni. Their archery skills far surpassed Chu Tianning's. Gu Beiwe's eyes flashed with a complicated look as he feigned ignorance. Nether Clan head, what do you mean by this? What do I mean? Old Man didn't make the first move to gain the upper hand. Now it should be Old Man asking you what you mean by this, right? Chu Yuni retorted cold. As he guarded against Gu Beiwe, he shot a glance at the archers by his side. The archers understood and split into two lines. None of them had bows in their hands, only arrows. Seeing this, the crowd was stunned. Chu Yuni's arrow towards Gu Beiwe had been so fast that no one had seen it clearly. They assumed it was a crossbow bolt, but now everyone could see it clearly. These people were going to shoot arrows with their bare hands. Despite his bearded face, Gu Beiwe's smile was still warm and gentle. But as he smiled, his knees gave way and he fell to his knees. Chapter 581. Even though Gu Beiwei was kneeling on one knee, he was still clutching the little golden dagger in his left hand. Because his right shoulder had been pierced by the arrow, he couldn't lift it at all. But Chu Yuni understood him all too well. He knew he had the dagger in hand, so he didn't approach him. Instead, he took out an arrow and aimed it at Gu Beiwei's left shoulder. As expected, this traitor had thrown in his lot with Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. Gu Beiwei stared at Chu Yuni's arrow from a distance. His clear eyes gradually grew complicated until they turned murky. With the friendship between the Nether and Shadow clans, he never expected Chu Yuni to suspect him and scheme against him. Nor did he expect a shrewd man like Long Fei Yi to fall into the man's trap. Only the time it took to brew a cup of tea had passed, but his heart had long been flustered beneath his calm exterior. He couldn't think straight. He knew he couldn't protect Miss Yunqi this time. There was only one way left. Although it wasn't a long-term solution, it could at least guarantee Miss Yunqi's safety for now. The solution was to reveal her noble identity. Even if the Nether clan was full of ambition and had been searching for the West Chu imperial heir all this time, just to hold the Son of Heaven and command his vassals, Chu Yuni was still afraid and in awe of Miss Yunqi's identity. He didn't dare to do anything. That arrow was about to fly out. Even if he could block another one for her, he wouldn't be able to block a third or fourth. Gu Beiwei decided to tell her. But right at this moment, Han Yunqi, who had been hiding behind him all this time, suddenly moved. After all, Gu Beiwei's heart was flustered, but most of his attention was still on the woman behind him. He was afraid that she'd be startled or hurt. Who would have thought that at this very moment, he would feel her powerful killing intent? Only someone with high martial arts skills could sense it. At the same time, only someone with high martial arts skills could emit it. But now she knew martial arts and wanted to kill him. Gu Beiwei's stern face suddenly curved into a self-mocking smile. So there'd come a day when he'd been tricked. Was this what they meant by concern leads to confusion? The woman behind him was not the real Han Yunqi, and the one lying on the ground was definitely not the real Duke of Qin, Long Fei Yi. What a Long Fei Yi! They had all been deceived. Just as Chu Yuni fired his arrow, Gu Beiwei abruptly shifted to the side and dodged it. The arrow brushed past the fake Han Yunqi's abdomen, narrowly missing its mark. Chu Yuni smiled coldly to himself. Gu Beiwei and Long Fei Yi's relationship was only so-so. They'd both fly their own ways in the face of life and death. Men, take him down, Chu Yuni ordered coldly. Since he'd fallen out with Gu Beiwei today, he couldn't allow him to leave. Besides mocking himself, Gu Beiwei didn't show much emotion on his face. No matter how severe his shoulder injury was, he'd just cripple it. But his leg injury would directly affect his shadow arts. He'd be hard-pressed to escape this calamity. As long as he was sure Yunqi was fine, he was as calm as ever. Chu Yuni sent most of his archers to surround Gu Beiwei while he faced the fake Han Yunqi alone. He thought he could take his time dealing with this woman who didn't know martial arts, but as soon as he fired his arrow, the fake Han Yunqi dodged it and leapt onto a tree to fire a signal flare into the air. Chu Yuni finally realized what had happened. He'd fallen into a trap. Long Fei Yi hadn't come. Han Yunqi hadn't come either. He'd clearly seen them disguise themselves and stand on either side of him. Could it be that they'd been swapped out on their way here? Chu Yuni had no time to think about when they'd swapped out the people by his side. His heart was filled with panic. Long Fei Yi's absence meant that the Long Fei Yi was the Oriole in this dog-eat-dog scheme. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the Oriole behind. Now that the fake Han Yunqi had fired off a signal flare, heaven knows how Long Fei Yi was going to beat them at their own game. It had to be said that Chu Yuni feared Long Fei Yi far more than he feared Western Zhou's imperial clan. Men, hurry and find the item. Prepare to retreat, Chu Yuni ordered. Of course, he didn't forget to kill the fake Han Yunqi. Now that he was sure this woman knew martial arts, Chu Yuni couldn't afford to be careless. Within 5 arrows, the fake Han Yunqi was killed. A few poison masters disguised as court ladies stepped forward to surround the 1,000-year ginkgo tree, searching for the wood of 10,000 poisons. Chu Yuni was very unwilling to face such a cruel reality. He purposely stepped forward and tore off the fake Han Yunqi's scarf, only to see that the face was different. Next, he tore off the fake Long Fei Ye's beard, only to discover that it wasn't the real Long Fei Ye at all. Long Fei Ye. Chu Yuni gritted his teeth in hatred. Unexpectedly, the corpse of the fake Long Fei Ye suddenly rose to his feet and stabbed Chu Yuni's arm with a dagger. Chu Yuni sensed the movement and quickly dodged to the side, but he was still a step too late. The dagger stabbed deep into his right arm. After all, the right arm was the key to archery. If it was injured, the power of his arrows would be greatly reduced. This fake Long Fei Ye must have planned this all along. He was probably waiting for this moment to injure his arm and restrict his driving arrow arts. Abominable! Chu Yuni kicked out viciously. The fake Long Fei Ye was on his last breath, so he really did fall to the ground. Still, his mission was accomplished. On the side, the Western Zhou Imperial Guards were bewildered when they saw that it wasn't His Highness Duke of Qin who had fallen. Although they wanted to seize the chance to counterattack and save Empress Shui, she was currently being held captive by the old mama. After taking care of the fake Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi, Chu Yuni immediately took out an arrow and aimed it at Gu Beiwei, who was still dodging the arrows. But before he could fire, Gu Beiwei was captured by the archers. Gu Beiwei could escape if he didn't need to protect anyone, but the price would be too high. He'd be severely injured. Moreover, he wasn't sure whether the Long Fei Yi had set up an ambush outside. If he ran into the Long Fei Yi in his current state, there was no way he'd be able to escape. On the other hand, he'd be safer in Chu Yuni's hands. Seeing Gu Beiwei captured, Chu Yuni considered retreating. "Have you found it yet?" he shouted at the poison masters. The situation was getting worse and worse for them, so they had to move faster and retreat. 10,000-year-old poison wood was no ordinary object. If it could hide in the ginkgo tree and survive for 1,000 years, then it had to be something else. These poison masters were specially trained by which ant to search for the wood of 10,000 years poisons. Unfortunately, they had circled around the ginkgo tree several times, but they couldn't even find the poison. It was basically impossible to find the wood of 10,000 years poisons in such a short time. Clan head, we won't be able to find it without a few days, the head of the poison masters reported anxiously. Trash. Chu Yuni was both anxious and angry. Uproot this tree and bring it back. As soon as he finished, a mocking voice rose up. The Nether clan head is so domineering. Chu Yuni looked back and saw 3 masked experts dressed in black robes appear out of thin air to fly out from the side. Their mocking voice had been disguised with a voice-changing art, so Chu Yuni couldn't tell who they were. But he was certain that they were Long Fei Ye's group. Long Fei Ye, you lied to old man. Where's your credibility? Chu Yuni rebuked loudly, obviously for the others to hear. No matter what, he was going to drag Long Fei Ye down with him this time. He wanted the Long Fei Yi and Western Zhou's imperial clan to become irreconcilable enemies. That way, Western Zhou wouldn't be on friendly terms with the commander-in-chief's estate in the south-central regions after the Chu clan retreated to Western Liang. But the masked man only laughed maniacally. Credibility? Long Fei Ye's credibility has long been eaten by dogs, don't you know? The masked man's cheerful laughter made it obvious that he was in a good mood. Anyone who heard him was certain that this wasn't the Duke of Qin himself. Who was he? Did he have a grudge against Long Fei Yi? Chu Yuni gave a start before glancing at the other 2 masked men. When he saw that neither of them had moved, he grew even more confused. Did Long Fei really not come? Or perhaps Long Fei Yi was one of the 2 men. Chu Yuni didn't dare to be careless. He signaled for all the archers to surround the ginkgo tree and shoot. The 3 masked men immediately shot out from beneath the tree, dodging the arrows as they attacked the Chu clan archers. Chu Yuni quickly joined in the fray, but it wasn't long before thorny vines sprouted from beneath the tree. The thorny vines resembled countless tentacles that spread wildly in all directions towards the archers. Meanwhile, the 3 masked men danced in the air between the vines, dodging the arrows as they attacked, sending the archers into a panic. For a moment, everyone was stunned. Nobody expected such a strange art to exist in this world. Don't get distracted. Shoot with all your might. Chu Yuni roared as an arrow flew through the air, hitting one of the thorny vines squarely on its roots and snapping it in half. Seeing this, the archers' morale was greatly boosted, and they all concentrated on shooting. However, they didn't know why, but suddenly, 3 archers fell down. "There's a hidden weapon. Everyone be careful, they're using it," one of the archers shouted. As soon as he spoke, a needle so thin that it was almost invisible to the naked eye pierced his throat, killing him instantly. As the head of a clan, Chu Yuni wasn't someone who was easy to deal with. He'd sensed something strange as soon as the weapons appeared and sacrificed a few archers to get a clear look at the source of the weapons. Currently, he was standing on one side. His eyes narrowed as he aimed for the attacker's heart. Meanwhile, the attacker was completely oblivious as he continued to dodge the rain of arrows. "You're seeking death." Chu Yuni released his arrows viciously. The first to sense the danger was the arrogant black-robed man. He spun around and shouted, "Careful," he shouted, abruptly kicking his companion aside as the arrow streaked towards him like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, more arrows were flying towards him from the other side. The other 2 men were surrounded by arrows and couldn't help him at all. At this moment, the sound of a whip cracking filled the air. First came the sound of the whip, then the whip. A long golden whip soared through the air like a golden dragon and knocked down half of the arrows. "Who's here?" Chapter 582. Who's here? It wasn't just one person, but a man and a woman. Both of them were dressed in black as well, so their identities were unknown. The masked man had one arm around the woman's waist while the other wielded a long whip. He stood tall in the air, his figure tall and slender, his black robes mysterious. The woman in his arms didn't seem to care about the rain of arrows at all. She was completely focused on the 1,000-year ginkgo tree. Chu Yuni immediately realized that it was Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. He'd never seen Long Fei Ye's golden dragon whip with his own eyes, but he'd heard Witch Ant talk about it before. Last time at the Poison Sect's underground palace, Witch Ant had seen Long Fei Ye's true skills. It wasn't Celestial Mountain sword skills, but his whip skills of unknown origins. The woman in Long Fei Ye's arms was the real Han Yunqi, the Han Yunqi who didn't know martial arts. Long Fei Yi set Han Yunqi down beneath the ginkgo tree before the savage black-robed man from before retreated and kicked away all the female poison masters. He stood by Han Yunqi's side to protect her. Who else could this fellow be but Gu Qixiao? Naturally, the other 2 were Chu Shifeng and Tang Li. As soon as Gu reached Han Yunqi's side, Long Fei Yi flew up to meet the enemy alongside Chu Shifeng and Tang Li. His exquisite whip skills and powerful internal energy allowed him to knock down a wave of arrows with a single swing of his whip. "Long Fei Yi, you're finally here," Chu Yuni shouted, but Long Fei Yi ignored him. His whip lashed out at the archers in front of him. Chu Yuni had long wanted to have a real fight with Long Fei Yi. He took out an arrow and knocked it with his bare hands. Heaven knows how much strength he'd imbued into the arrow, but it was already vibrating before it even left the bow. It seemed to be itching to kill the enemy. His killing intent was so strong that Long Fei Yi looked back, but his cold, emotionless eyes were filled with scorn. "Go to hell," Chu Yuni roared as he released the arrows. 10 or so of them flew out at the same time, each one brimming with killing intent that cut through the air like a hot knife through butter. Moreover, each one of them seemed to have a mind of their own and grew eyes. They divided up the work on their own and aimed for different fatal spots on Long Fei Ye's body. In a flash, everyone looked over. Tang Li and Chu Shifeng were busy dealing with the archers while paying attention to the situation. Even the simple-minded Gu was a little worried, while Han Yunqi, who was busy inspecting the wood of 10,000 poisons, temporarily forgot what she was doing. She couldn't sense any killing intent, so she had no idea what was going on, but intuition told her that Long Fei Yi was in danger. Not too far away, the captured Gu Beiwen knitted his brows as he stared fixedly at one of the arrows. Without a doubt, that was the strongest of the bunch. Long Fei Yi had long realized that one of the arrows was extremely deadly, but he didn't have time to think. His whip arts required enough space to unleash its power. If the arrows got too close, he'd have no choice but to unsheath his sword. As soon as he drew his sword, Chu Yuni would latch onto it and confirm his identity. Although Chu Yuni was far away, the speed of the arrows made it all happen in an instant. Long Fei Yi didn't have time to think before he lashed out with his whip. The power of the long whip was slightly inferior to the power of the sharp arrows. When the long whip blocked all the sharp arrows, it was the real contest between the two forces, and also the most direct contest. Time seemed to stop at this moment, as if all things in the world had stopped moving. Both the whip and the arrows froze in midair as the two forces faced off against each other. Of course, it didn't take more than a second. The whip's momentum quickly suppressed the arrow's momentum and forced them all down. Long Fei Yi flicked the whip lightly in his hand. Although it looked easy, it took a lot of strength. The arrows couldn't hold on any longer and fell to the ground one by one. But there was only one arrow that didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it held on against Long Fei Yi's whip, clanging and clanging as it grew restless. It didn't seem satisfied with just defending, but even wanted to attack. Without a doubt, this was the most powerful arrow. Long Fei Yi tried again, but still couldn't knock it down. At this moment, Chu Yuni fired another arrow straight at Long Fei Yi's eye. Seeing this, everyone grew alarmed. Chu Shifeng and Tang Li wanted to help, but the archers were all in sync with Chu Yuni. Every one of them seemed to have lost their minds as they shot like madmen, making it impossible for them to free themselves. Han Yunqi pushed Gu aside and said, "Don't worry about me, go help. Hurry." Gu recovered his wits. He was too far away to use his vines to help, but it was too late. The arrow was too fast. Idiot! Gu couldn't help but curse. He knew that Long Fei Yi wouldn't use his sword for the sake of hiding his identity, but why didn't he withdraw his whip and retreat? He was just courting death by trying to resist it. The arrow was about to hit Long Fei Yi's eye with enough force to topple mountains and overturn seas. For a moment, everyone stopped breathing. Han Yunqi gaped. In her eyes, Chu Yuni's arrow was as fast and powerful as a bullet. But in the nick of time, Long Fei Yi raised his hand and viciously knocked the arrow aside. When he dropped his hand, fresh blood trickled down the back of his hand, a testament to the power of the arrow. But he'd still managed to block it, hadn't he? Everyone exhaled in relief. Chu Yuni was surprised, but he didn't give up. He quickly followed up with another arrow, this one aimed not at Long Fei Yi, but at the arrow that was fighting against Long Fei Yi's whip. The arrow struck Long Fei Yi's arrow with a powerful force that pushed the arrow back. It flew past the whip and headed straight for Long Fei Yi. It had to be said that as the head of the clan, Chu Yuni's arrows were the best of the Chu clan. Unfortunately, his opponent was Long Fei Yi. Long Fei pulled back his whip and rebounded, accurately trapping the arrow in place. He'd been waiting for this chance for a long time. None of them expected this outcome. Chu Yuni was so shocked that his face had turned white. Long Fei hadn't even started his counterattack before Chu Yuni took out a bunch of arrows and shot them in his direction. Actually, it wasn't strange for Chu Yuni to lose his head in a situation like this, because Long Fei Yi was clearly preparing to counterattack. Despite the rain of arrows, Long Fei Yi's whip lashed out viciously at the arrow. The whip slithered forward like a snake, sweeping away all the arrows in its path. Finally, Long Fei Yi lashed out with the whip, sending his internal energy coursing through the whip until it reached the body of the arrow. The arrow shot out with enough force to topple mountains and overturn seas, heading straight for Chu Yuni. Chu Yuni had lived for more than half his life, but he'd never imagined that he'd be hurt by one of his own arrows one day. He had no time to dodge, but reflexively dodged to the side. The arrow sank deep into his right arm, completely submerging itself in his flesh. What a vicious arrow! If his whip was already like this, wouldn't he shoot through his hand if he drew his bow instead? An archer's greatest taboo was injuring their hands. Chu Yuni was extremely unwilling, but there was nothing he could do except flee. Withdraw. All of the archers retreated at his command. The old mama fled with Empress Shui in tow, while Chu Yuni personally escorted Gu Beiwei to bring up the rear. Western Zhou's imperial guards chased after them, but didn't dare to make a move with Empress Shui in their hands. Long Fei Yi's gaze was fixed on Gu Beiwei, but he didn't chase after them. His ultimate goal was the wood of 10,000 poisons, so he had to get his hands on it before reinforcements arrived. Otherwise, without Empress Shui as a hostage, heaven knows what would happen when reinforcements arrived. Very soon, the 3 high monks guarding the altar flew up into the air. Unfortunately, they couldn't get close to the ginkgo tree because Long Fei Yi, Chu Shifeng, and Tang Li were all standing guard. One Long Fei Yi was enough to deal with all 3 of them, much less Chu Shifeng and Tang Li. The 3 high monks had seen the exchange of blows just then and knew they couldn't win. Thus, they asked questions in an attempt to fish for information. Just who are you people? What are you looking for in the ginkgo tree? How did you get in here? If they tried to force their way in, they'd have triggered all sorts of traps. Without a map, even the most powerful of experts would be unable to avoid triggering them. But these people had come without a sound. It wasn't as if they'd infiltrated the Empress's guard of honor. The high monks didn't understand. Are you Tianix's Duke of Qin? A man of character doesn't change his name. Just who are you? Tell us your name. Is that female benefactor Qin Wangfei? Despite the 3 high monks' questions, everyone seemed to have been infected by Long Fei Ye's attitude. Even Gu didn't speak. Han Yunqi activated the detox system's in-depth inspection function and found that the 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree was poisoned. But just like the water and earth of 10,000 poisons, the detox system couldn't tell what kind of poison it was. The 10,000 poisons of the 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, all seemed to be the same. They were a mixture of all kinds of poisons. Therefore, the detoxification system could detect the toxicity, but it could not determine the type of toxicity, nor could it detect specific information. Han Yunqi knew they couldn't stay here for long, or else it'd be hard to leave. She inspected the tree again, but still couldn't pinpoint its exact location. She was depressed. It wasn't that she'd forgotten about the poison storage space. Although the space could store all kinds of poisons, it had even stored such a large poison pond. But right now she was facing a 1,000-year-old tree that wasn't completely poisonous. More importantly, she didn't see the wood of 10,000 poisons. How was she supposed to store something she couldn't see? At the very least, she couldn't do it with her current skills. What to do? Did she really have to cut down the tree like Chu Yuni said? At this moment, a flurry of footsteps sounded around them. Without a doubt, reinforcements had arrived. Gu asked anxiously, "Did you find it?" Actually, Gu had been searching the entire time as well, but he couldn't even smell the poison. He almost suspected that the wood of 10,000 poisons wasn't on this tree at all. At this moment, Long Fei Yi had turned back to look at them with an urging gaze. Han Yunqi was anxious. Abruptly, a thought flashed through her mind. Got it. She had a plan. A very simple one. Why didn't she think of it before? I'm so stupid. Chapter 583. Although she couldn't see the wood of 10,000 poisons, Han Yunqi still thought of a simple way to get it. Gu Qixiao, cover me quick. So speaking, she hid behind Gu Qixiao with her back to the crowd. Cover you for what? Gu was full of doubts. He wanted to turn around to see what was going on, but was afraid of ruining Han Yunqi's plans. In the end, he could only stand there obediently. It wasn't clear what Han Yunqi was doing, but before she could finish, a large group of soldiers had arrived to surround the entire ginkgo tree. Next came a group of archers who rushed to the front and knelt down on one knee, aiming their bows at the group. Judging from the situation, Chu Yuni's group must have escaped without a hitch. Otherwise, no matter how important the tree was, it couldn't compare to Emperor Kongqing's favored empress. Archers? They can't be from the Chu clan, right? Haha. Gu laughed sarcastically, making the leader of the archers' faces turn ugly. The Chu clan's archers were very famous, but how could they be from the Chu clan? News of the events at Thousand Buddha Cave had long spread. The Chu clan had not only kidnapped the empress, but raised troops in various regions to rebel. Within a single day, the Chu clan had become Western Zhou's traitors. It was as if a great earthquake had occurred in the imperial court of Western Zhou. Everyone was shocked by the sudden news, and it took them a long time to recover. By now, Emperor Kongcheng was busy dealing with the mutiny in various regions. Meanwhile, Chu Yuni had escaped from Thousand Buddha Cave, but was still being pursued by its guards. Although Emperor Kongcheng had no idea what Chu Yuni and the black-robed men wanted the thousand-year ginkgo tree for, he couldn't let them get away with it. Emperor Kongcheng even sent an urgent message via Flying Eagle, demanding that they capture them alive and find out if the black-robed men were really related to Tianning's Duke of Qin. This team advises you to surrender obediently, or else our arrows won't open their eyes. The leader of the archers warned loudly. All right, forgive him for his ignorance. After all, he had not personally witnessed the battle between the experts just now. He could not imagine that there was someone in the world who could play with arrows like that. Long Fei Yi and the others naturally disdained his warning. However, Long Fei Yi did not want to stay here for long because the longer he stayed, the more likely it was that his identity would be exposed. Moreover, the guards of the Thousand Buddha Cave were not for show. Once all the surrounding guards were transferred over, they would be in a lot of trouble. He turned to look at Han Yunxi and whispered, "Do you want to uproot the tree? I reckon they'll have to be uprooted. 1,000-year-old tree. Who knows how deep its roots are? Are you sure we still have time to uproot the tree? Are you sure you can escape with such a big tree? What if the exit is sealed and we can't get out?" Tang Li had to remind everyone to face reality. Long Fei Ye's eyes flashed with a complicated light. He didn't say anything. Although they had defeated the Chu family, they hadn't found the wood of 10,000 poisons. They could only say that they had come here in vain. They assumed that finding the 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree was the same as finding the wood of 10,000 poisons. But who knew things would turn out like this? After a while, Han Yunxi still didn't answer. At this moment, the archers began to fire their arrows. Long Fei Yi impatiently flicked his whip to knock down the first arrow, then the second at the archers. As the archers retreated, a large group of soldiers with spears and shields rushed forward to surround them. Even the soldiers had been transferred over. From the looks of it, they weren't going to let them off. How troublesome. Duke of Qin, why don't we leave first? Chu Yuni didn't go against them, but we did. We have to be careful not to end up making wedding clothes for someone else. Tang Li reminded them again. Judging from the current situation, Western Zhou had even transferred soldiers over. If a fight really broke out, the entire temple would be destroyed. If that happened, Chu Yuni might turn back and reap the benefits of the fishermen. Master, as long as this tree is here, we don't have to worry about not finding the wood of 10,000 poisons. Our esteemed Wang Fei's poison skills are even superior to his witch ants. If she can't find it, the Chu clan won't be able to either. Let's just retreat first. Chu Shifeng coaxed. Just as Long Fei Yi decided to retreat, the soldiers in front of them suddenly gave a start. Each and every one of them gaped at the ginkgo tree. Many of them even dropped their weapons. What's going on? Long Fei Yi and the rest gave a start. When they looked back, they were given a fright. The ginkgo tree was actually disappearing into thin air. Large chunks of the tree disappeared into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Not long after, the entire tree was gone, vanishing into thin air. In that instant, the scene from Medicine City's Medicine Forest surfaced in Long Fei Ye's mind. The scene was so similar. Back then, the giant poison pond had disappeared in an instant as well, leaving the Medicine Forest guards gaping in shock. Everyone watched in disbelief. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was crouching on one side, observing the changes in the soil. She just thought of using perplexing butterfly illusion to corrode the 1,000-year ginkgo tree. Although the method was simple, it was still difficult to execute. Fortunately, she had some good stuff hidden in her detox system, or else she wouldn't have been able to do it right away. Although perplexing butterfly illusion was highly corrosive, a few drops wouldn't be enough to quickly penetrate the ginkgo tree's well-developed roots. Thus, she added a few drops of a special poison enhancer into the mix and dripped it into the soil. This was something from the modern era. She only had 3 portions on hand and had been reluctant to use it. Today, she'd finally used up 1 portion. The soil beneath her feet began to corrode. As the perplexing butterfly illusion seeped deeper into the soil, more and more of it disappeared. But this still wasn't enough to satisfy Han Yunqi. She endured the pain and used another drop of the perplexing butterfly illusion enhancer. A single drop caused the entire patch of ground to sink in. Although it looked like it had sunk in, it was actually the soil that had been corroded. Not even the roots of the 1,000-year ginkgo tree were left behind. Instead, a hole as deep as 2 people's height was left behind. There were also many small holes in this hole, probably where the roots of the tree had been deeply embedded. Han Yunqi had always suspected that the wood of 10,000 poisons was in the roots of this ginkgo tree, so her attention was completely focused on this hole. If the wood of 10,000 poisons really was there, the perplexing butterfly illusion would definitely react with it and form a poisonous tear. This way, the detox system would be able to detect similar poisons. Long Fei Yi and the others were close and could see everything clearly. However, the surrounding soldiers didn't understand what was going on. They only felt that this group of people knew sorcery and didn't dare to rashly approach. Han Yunqi squatted by the hole and carefully examined it. She really did detect it. Once she detected something, things became much easier. She locked onto a small hole below the large hole and said in a low voice, "Gu, take me down there." "You. What exactly do you want to do?" Even though Gu could recognize poisons, he still couldn't believe what was happening in front of him. Before Han Yunqi could reply, Long Fei had already walked over. He didn't ask any questions, but simply jumped down with Han Yunqi in his arms. Naturally, he'd leave the trouble above to Gu Qixiao and the rest. Gu rolled his eyes. Even though his face was covered, his mood could be seen from his eyes. He was very unhappy. If they really attacked, Gu and the others could still deal with it for a while. Moreover, the surrounding soldiers all turned from shock to fear. They thought that they knew sorcery and didn't dare to rashly approach. Han Yunqi took out the perplexing butterfly illusion and dripped it into the target hole. Soon, the soil disappeared, and a large hole was formed. Fortunately, Long Fei Yi was there. Otherwise, Han Yunqi would have fallen half to death. However, even so, she still didn't see the poisonous tear. "It's probably buried very deep like the roots," she muttered to herself. Although Long Fei didn't understand what she was talking about, he didn't ask her any questions. Instead, he helped her in silence. In the end, Han Yunqi used a total of 10 drops of perplexing butterfly illusion and dug the hole more than 20 meters deep before she found what she wanted. "This is it." Han Yunqi was overjoyed and carefully picked it up. Long Fei Yi looked at it and saw that it was made of wood. Like the previous few poisonous tears, it was very small and shaped like a teardrop. This was the 5th poisonous tear they had obtained. Of the 5 elements poisons, only the fire and metal of 10,000 poisons were left. As for the poisonous blood, only the poisonous beast's blood and the last unknown blood were left. The poisonous beast's blood had to wait for the little thing to slowly nurture the poison in its body. Thinking back, if he had known that the little thing's blood could break the perplexing butterfly illusion, he definitely wouldn't have allowed Han Yunqi to use the little thing's blood to save Long Tianma. Many things wouldn't have happened in the past if he had known earlier. Especially when it came to the fate between people, it was impossible to know earlier. Long Fei Yi wasn't someone who liked to reminisce about the past. In this instant, he didn't know why, but he actually thought of the words back then. How could Han Yunqi know what Long Fei Yi was thinking? Han Yunqi put away the poisonous tear. When she looked up, she was shocked. "So deep? Hold on tight. Let's go up." Only then did Long Fei Yi regain his senses. He clearly told her to hold on tight, but he first reached out and hugged her waist so tightly that he didn't need her to hold on. Han Yunqi snickered. When did this guy learn to talk nonsense? Fine, she had the guts to think, but not the guts to say it. She obediently wrapped her arms around Long Fei Yi and hugged him tight. By the time they flew out of the cave, Tang Li and Chu Shifeng were already embroiled in a melee with the soldiers. Their numbers had doubled from before, and they were even shooting fire arrows into the cave. Gu stood guard by the entrance and kept kicking away the incoming arrows. With so many people, it was difficult for Gu and the rest to fight back. When he saw Long Fei Yi carrying Han Yunqi out safely, Gu exhaled in relief. "Did you get the thing? We're here. Withdraw." Long Fei said coldly. It was difficult to defeat such a large group of soldiers, but retreating was easy. Tang Li led the way while Long Fei and Han Yunxi followed closely behind. Gu and Chu Shifeng brought up the rear as the group quickly retreated in the direction they'd come from. They'd been able to sneak in without alerting the enemy because of Chu Yuni's map and Tang Li's incredible ability to avoid and destroy traps. As the soldiers chased after them, they quickly fell into a trap. In the end, they didn't dare to move forward until they'd left Thousand Buddha Cave. In their hearts, Long Fei's group was a force to be reckoned with. They were too mysterious and valiant. The abbot and commander of the soldiers were currently inspecting the scene. They couldn't figure out how the 1,000-year ginkgo tree had vanished into thin air or how such a deep hole had appeared in the ground. After a while, the old abbot sighed with emotion. Perhaps this is fate. The tree's fate, the people's fate, and the country's fate. Chapter 584. Destiny? The commander had no idea what that meant, but the words destiny of the nation made him break out in cold sweat. He pretended not to hear a thing and personally took care of the fake Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei's corpses on the ground. He didn't believe that the Duke of Qin was involved in this, but he had to personally transport the corpses to White City for Emperor Kong Cheng to see. As for whether the emperor believed him, he had no idea. What would Emperor Kong Cheng think? Emperor Kong Cheng knew that the Chu clan had exposed the crown prince's involvement in the embezzlement case. This was a sign of rebellion, but he never expected them to act so quickly. He couldn't figure out where the Chu clan's escape route lay. He was also keeping an eye on Empress Chu's movements in Western Liang. Not only had the Chu clan rebelled, but they'd even kidnapped his favorite empress. How could he tolerate such a thing? In his fury, Emperor Kong Cheng would never believe a word from the Chu clan again. While Emperor Kong Cheng was using his iron fist to suppress the rebellion of the Chu clan troops, he was also more or less concerned about the situation at Thousand Buddha Cave. After all, the Chu clan's rebellion had started there, and it had a lot to do with the Thousand Ginkgo tree. Eagle Messenger after Eagle Messenger arrived at the palace, allowing Emperor Kong Cheng to learn of the situation at Thousand Buddha Cave. He also learned that Chu Yuni had called the impersonators the Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei at first, then changed to calling the masked man His Highness Duke of Qin. How could he still trust Chu Yuni? As he saw it, Chu Yuni was simply trying to drive a wedge between the Duke of Qin and Western Zhou. He was trying to drive a wedge between the Duke of Qin and Western Zhou. A few days later, the two impersonators' corpses were placed in front of Emperor Kong Cheng. He was even more certain that Chu Yuni was trying to drive a wedge between them. The Chu clan's wishful thinking. Humph. Zhun isn't stupid enough to offend the Duke of Qin. Emperor Kong Cheng snorted. No matter how good a position Empress Chu could secure for the Chu clan in Western Liang, the Chu clan would definitely side with the Empress as soon as they rebelled. That would mean that Western Zhou and Tianning's century-old marriage alliance would be broken. At this time, if Western Zhou was on good terms with the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate, they would join forces to form a semicircle around Tianning's western and southern borders. Tianning's eastern borders were Tianan, while its northern borders were northernly. In this way, Tianning would have offended everyone around them and would be isolated and without help. Even if Emperor Kong Cheng truly believed that the Duke of Qin had infiltrated Thousand Buddha Mountain, he'd still pretend he didn't know and continue to be on good terms with the Duke of Qin. This was the so-called strategy. A 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree disappeared into thin air? Your Majesty, this matter is too strange. In this old servant's opinion, there must be a secret that no one knows about. The old eunuch whispered. Emperor Kong Cheng was still in a fit of anger, so these words only made him angrier. Watch your mouth. Pass down my order. Anyone who knows about this is to be killed without mercy. The old eunuch was alarmed. Your Majesty, this old servant doesn't know anything. I've forgotten everything. Please spare this old servant's life. Get out. If news of this gets out, we'll be the first to cut off your head. Emperor Kong Cheng roared. The 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree was Western Zhou's divine tree and Thousand Buddha Cave's most precious treasure. If news of this strange event spread during the Chu clan's rebellion, it would definitely be seen as an omen of misfortune and cause panic among the populace and the army. Thus, even if Emperor Kongqing didn't know the truth, his first order of business would be to seal off the news and silence all witnesses. Western Zhou was already in chaos. He wouldn't allow anything or anyone to add to the chaos. The old eunuch scrambled out of the room. For the sake of keeping the secret and preserving his life, one could only imagine how well he'd do things. After the old eunuch left, Emperor Kongqing secretly sent out a group of personal guards to investigate the matter in secret. All of his thoughts were focused on rescuing the empress and suppressing the Chu clan's rebellion. Meanwhile, the mysterious group of black-robed men were still in East Arrival Town, not far from Thousand Buddha Cave. Long Fei had only agreed to Chu Yunyi's plan that night to beat him at his own game. Although they'd stayed at the Chu clan's estate that night and were under their surveillance, he'd still contacted his guards and arranged for a replacement. From White City to Thousand Buddha Cave, he'd had plenty of chances to swap out his men. It could only be said that Chu Yunyi wasn't overconfident in himself, but underestimating Long Fei's methods. By now, Han Yunxi had finished explaining to everyone that the ginkgo tree's disappearance had been caused by perplexing butterfly illusion. Long Fei didn't think too much about the poison pawn's disappearance. Duke of Qin, they're actually planning to induce labor on Chuqinga? That's inconceivable. As soon as they were free, Tang Li couldn't wait to report the news. With Gu and the others present, he even called Long Fei the Duke of Qin. Long Fei had guessed that they'd make a fuss about Chuqinga, but never expected it to be induced labor. No one was more shocked than Han Yunxi. Really? She'd read a few classics in the modern world. Normally speaking, the smallest fetus was less than 5 months old and placed in an incubator with all sorts of equipment and medicine. Still, it was easy for such children to develop congenital defects. She never expected that Cloud Realm continent, where medical equipment was so crude, had the technology to induce labor as well. She had to admire the medical academy. Even if Chuqinga gave birth without a hitch, the child would still be safe. But how much time and effort would they have to put into taking care of it? Would the child really live long enough to sit on the throne? Most likely, the Chu clan wouldn't let him live for long. They'd only use him as a cover until they stabilized their power in Western Zhou and replaced him with a son of the Chu clan. It looks like they'll succeed in inducing labor, Long Fei said. In other words, the Chu clan will definitely take over Westjing City? Han Yunxi didn't have a good impression of Emperor Tianhui, but she was still unwilling to see Tianning fall into the Chu clan's hands. Hasn't that noble consort Ning made any moves? Chu Shifeng couldn't help but interrupt. Noble consort Ning has no children, Han Yunxi replied indifferently. Han Yunxi said mildly. She had a clear understanding of Emperor Tianhui's harem, who told her to be summoned to the palace every day to make things difficult for him. Noble consort Ning was one of Emperor Tianhui's 4 noble consorts, the most low-key of them all. She spent her days in seclusion, praying to Buddha, and staying away from worldly affairs. At first, Han Yunxi assumed that noble consort Ning had no backing behind her and was afraid of being bullied in the palace. But after asking around, she found out that noble consort Ning had the strongest backing amongst the 4 noble consorts, even stronger than the empress. That was because noble consort Ning's older brother was none other than one of Tianning's 3 great generals, Ning Cheng. Perhaps it was because of noble consort Ning's personality. Otherwise, none of the other noble consorts would have had a share in the inner palace's struggles. Unfortunately, this noble consort Ning couldn't even give birth to a princess, much less a son. Otherwise, with Tianning's current situation, General Ning's estate would definitely do the same even if noble consort Ning didn't fight with Chuqinga. Then there's only the 4th imperial prince left. He has a certain amount of power in the court and Emperor Tianhui's trust, Chu Shifeng added. Long Fei's plans were indeed based on the 4th imperial prince and General Ning's estate. Chu Shifeng, make the arrangements. We'll set out for Westjing this afternoon. Long Fei ordered immediately. The Wood of 10,000 Poisons was one of his goals on this trip, and another was to stir up chaos between Western Zhou and Tianning. With the Chu clan's military might and the Nether clan's foundations, they'd be a huge threat as soon as they found a foothold. Moreover, he wouldn't spare any of the members of Western Qin's imperial clan. He'd shouldered the grudges of his country for over 20 years, growing from tender shoulders to broad shoulders. He'd never given up when he was a child, much less now. Aside from Han Yunqi, no one else could dream of getting an exception from him. They set out in the afternoon. None of them had had a good rest over the past few days, so it was time for them to disperse and rest. Gu was about to leave when he asked, "Hey, did you guys notice that big-bearded man Chu Yuni captured? What's his background? Why were his shoulders and legs injured?" By the time Gu's group arrived, Gu Beiwei had already been captured. They had no idea what had happened before that. But Gu had still noticed one person. As for Han Yunqi, she was completely focused on the fight between Long Fei Yi and Chu Yuni, as well as the thousand-year ginkgo tree. She had no idea that Chu Yuni had captured someone else besides Empress Shui. If she knew that that person was the white-clothed young master who had risked his life to save her, if the white-clothed young master was injured because of her, if she knew that the white-clothed young master was still paying attention to her despite his injuries, how would she feel? Unfortunately, Lil Thing was sleeping in the poison storage space and couldn't smell him. Otherwise, Lil Thing would have rushed over to its gentleman's side at the sight of his injuries. Chu Shifeng and Tang Li were too busy dealing with the archers to notice the bearded man's presence. Both of them shook their heads. Han Yunqi was only curious. "Who did you capture?" She looked towards Long Fei Yi. "Is it one of us?" "It's not." Long Fei Yi denied immediately. Although the two impersonators were dead, the fake Han Yunqi signal not only told them they could move, but also that the Shadow Clan man had made his move. Actually, Long Fei Yi was surprised by the signal. He really was trying to sow discord between the Nether and Shadow clans to force the Shadow Clan man out, but he never expected the man to go to Thousand Buddha Cave as well. What was he doing there? What had happened between him and Chu Yuni to injure him so badly? With that man's skills, it'd be difficult for him to fight Chu Yuni, but more than enough to escape the Nether clan's rain of arrows. Just what had happened before they went over? "Who was that?" Han Yunqi asked. "Just like your substitute, he disguised himself as one of the guards." Gu added. Long Fei Ye's eyes flashed with displeasure, but he didn't show it. Chu Shifeng had long noticed his master's expression and quickly added, "Perhaps he was after the thousand-year ginkgo tree as well. In any case, we've already gotten the thing, so who cares? Everyone go rest. We'll set out in the afternoon," Long Fei Yi said simply before pulling Han Yunqi away. The three people left behind were all stunned. Did Long Fei Yi take the wrong medicine today? He actually told everyone to go rest. Was the sun going to rise from the west? Chapter 585. Tang Li and Gu Beiwei reacted in unison to Long Fei Ye's sudden thoughtfulness. They both rubbed their chins in thought. Chu Shifeng, on the other hand, had an inkling that this had something to do with the Shadow Clan. As expected, Long Fei Yi soon appeared in front of him after helping Han Yunqi settle down. "There are plenty of court ladies and eunuchs present. Find someone to ask around. The faster the better," Long Fei Yi said in a low voice. "Shadow Clan?" Chu Shifeng blurted out. Long Fei Yi didn't reply. Chu Shifeng resentfully prepared to leave, but Long Fei Yi stopped him. "Any progress with Cloud Realm Trade Consortium?" Long Fei Yi had long kept an eye on Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Now that Chu Tianin had revealed the D-Clan's whereabouts, he was paying close attention to the consortium's movements on the borders between Western Zhou and Tianing. Although he didn't have 100% proof that Cloud Realm Trade Consortium was the D-Clan's descendant, he had to be on guard against the Chu clan colluding with the D-Clan at a time like this. After all, any political power or military power would be on a completely different level once it was allied with a large financial group. This subordinate will keep an eye on things. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's current focus is on Medicine City, so there's been no movement on the borders between the two countries. This subordinate will keep investigating. Chu Tianin replied respectfully. Long Fei Yi nodded before allowing him to leave. "Shadow Clan," Long Fei Yi muttered to himself. Actually, he'd suspected more than once that the Shadow Clan fellow knew about Han Yunqi's origins. If he tried to explain things from this angle, then everything would be clear. But if that Shadow Clan fellow knew about Han Yunqi's origins, he would have told her everything long ago. Then he'd protect her by her side and never leave her side. That was the reason why Long Fei gave up his suspicions. Long Fei couldn't figure it out. No matter what, the Shadow Clan and the Nether Clan were enemies. At least he had one less worry. Where was the Shadow Clan gentleman now? How was he doing? Gu Beiwei was still in Chu Yuni's hands. Chu Yuni had taken Empress Shui hostage and only brought a dozen or so archers with him as they fled into the forest. For the past few days, they had been on their way without stopping. Firstly, they wanted to avoid the pursuit of the soldiers, and secondly, they wanted to meet up with General Chu in the east. Right now, it was the dead of night. Everyone was exhausted, so they reached a dense forest where Chu Yuni finally ordered them to rest. The delicate Empress Shui was easily frightened, much less tormented. She had already fainted several times along the way and was still unconscious. As long as she wasn't dead, Chu Yuni had no time to bother with her. Chu Yuni was more interested in Gu Beiwei. He had been puzzled when he was in the Thousand Buddha Cave. Now that he was temporarily safe, he immediately questioned Gu Beiwei the moment he stopped to rest. "What exactly is your relationship with the Duke of Qin?" he asked coldly. Faced with Chu Yuni's questions, Gu Beiwei remained unmoved. He had just been dragged off his horse and was currently leaning against a tree with his eyes closed. Mottled moonlight scattered across his face, covering it with a beard that couldn't hide its paleness and weakness. He was dressed in the white, tight-fitting robes of Western Zhou's guards that accentuated his slender figure. Beneath the moonlight, his white robes looked holy and pure. Unfortunately, the robes were stained with the color of blood. It was a ghastly sight to behold. One arrow had pierced through his shoulder, while the other pierced his calf. The blood had stopped flowing, so it wasn't life-threatening. Still, both wounds were vital points to him. With an injury to his shoulder, it would be difficult for him to use his golden dagger. With an injury to his calf, his shadow arts were completely restricted. Even if Chu Yuni wasn't watching him right now, he still wouldn't be able to escape. His body had been weak since he was a child, but his father and grandfather had taken care of him while he soaked in medicine. He wasn't suited to martial arts, but the Shadow Clan's shadow arts needed to be passed on. For this reason, he'd suffered hardships as a child. Whether it was a scorching summer or a world of ice and snow, he had to work hard to cultivate his internal energy. Aside from his golden dagger, he didn't know much about martial arts, because he'd used all of his internal energy to support his shadow arts. Before his grandfather left, he'd asked him what he should do if he couldn't hold on one day without finding the orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan. His grandfather stroked his head for a long time before saying, "Beiwei, the Shadow Clan's protectors were originally meant to protect their most beloved with their lives. Do you know why the Shadow Clan has been protecting Western Qin's imperial clan for generations?" He didn't understand, nor had he ever thought about it. He'd always been obedient and sensible from a young age. Whether it was his grandfather or his parents, he'd always obeyed their every word. When he was young, he thought his father wouldn't leave him if he was obedient. But in the end, his father still died in the medicinal tub. He thought he still had his mother, but she'd gone with his father that very day. That year, he was only 6 years old. From then on, he and his grandfather depended on each other for survival. Why? Ever since he was young, he'd been told the purpose and meaning of life. Because the ancestor of the Shadow Clan fell in love with the Empress of Western Qin. He couldn't protect her completely, but he insisted on eloping with her. In the end, the Empress died of illness while fleeing. Reaching there, his grandfather sighed very powerlessly. "Beiwei, you should know. Something like illness can't be exchanged for a life. Even if you're willing to take her place, you can't." Back then, he was only in his teens, still underage. His medical skills weren't as good as they were now, but he understood. His father's death was the best proof. His mother had said that if it was possible, she was willing to bear the torment of illness and death in his father's place. Unfortunately, there were just too many things in this world that couldn't be replaced. Because of the Empress' death, The emperor was furious and wanted to slaughter the entire Shadow Clan. The ancestor made a promise, promising the Shadow Clan to protect Western Qin's imperial clan with their lives for generations to come, never to betray them, which saved the Shadow Clan. He remembered that his grandfather had paused for a long time after he finished speaking before saying his final words. His grandfather had said, "Beiyue, you're the only one left of the Shadow Clan. If there comes a day when you meet a woman you love, protect her with all your heart. Forget about the Shadow Clan's protection." Unfortunately, the woman he'd met was her, and he'd been the one to set up the trap himself. He'd lured her to the poison sect's underground palace and used her blood to open the Xin gold door in the sky pit, proving her identity as the orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan. When the two kinds of protection overlapped, he had no choice, nor did he need to. Protecting was his destiny. By the time Chu Yuni pulled the arrow out of Gu Beiyue's shoulder, Gu Beiyue had finally awakened from his memories. Fresh blood immediately gushed from his wound as the intense pain made him knit his brows. As a doctor, he knew better than anyone else that if he didn't treat the wound tonight, his arm would be crippled. "Just what's your relationship with the Duke of Qin and the rest?" Chu Yuni asked angrily. He wasn't patient enough to hide a trace of worry in his heart. If Gu Beiyue had colluded with the Duke of Qin, why didn't he know those two were imposters? Why did he expose himself and get injured for nothing? If Gu Beiyue hadn't colluded with the Duke of Qin, then why did he risk his life to protect Han Yunxi? Chu Yuni desperately needed an answer to pacify the restless doubts in his heart. Gu Beiyue pressed a hand against his wound and glared at Chu Yuni. "Hurry and find someone to bring Jinshuang medicine and hemostatic medicine over. Otherwise, you won't know a thing." Chu Yuni was stunned by the viciousness and determination in his eyes. He subconsciously backed away, unsure of what he was afraid of. He'd watched this child grow up, but had never seen him so cold and vicious before. Hearing Gu Beiyue's words only made Chu Yuni more doubtful. He didn't delay, but found someone to bring the medicine over. As long as there was medicine, any injury was nothing to Gu Beiyue. He didn't need anyone to help him, either. His movements were nimble as he cleaned up his wound, applied medicine, and bandaged it. Soon enough, the two arrow wounds were treated beautifully. Seeing this, Chu Yuni couldn't wait to ask, "Just what happened?" Gu Beiyue's eyes flashed with contempt. If not for the fact that he was facing Han Yunxi, he'd never reveal anything to Chu Yuni. After treating his wound, he felt much better and asked, "What do you mean, what happened?" "You." Chu Yuni fumed as he voiced his suspicions. Gu Beiyue smiled. "I like Qin Wangfei. It's that simple." "You." Chu Yuni was surprised. "Nether Clan head. I'm afraid it's impossible to find the orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan. You should know very well what your Nether Clan has been up to these past few years. I'm the only one left of the Shadow Clan, and I don't have long to live either. I only want to live for myself for the next few years," Gu Beiyue intoned. Chu Yuni was surprised to find that there was no room for doubt. His Nether Clan had long betrayed the imperial clan in their hearts, much less Gu Beiyue. "In other words, you weren't the one who leaked the Nether Clan's driving arrow arts to the Duke of Qin?" Chu Yuni finally understood. Gu Beiyue smiled coldly. He never expected the Nether Clan head to suspect him because of this. Still, he only laughed it off. He had no idea that Long Feiyi was well aware of the relationship between the Nether and Shadow clans, so he didn't suspect Long Feiyi of trying to sow discord. As for Chu Yuni, he only assumed that General Chu had added oil and vinegar to the fire. It wasn't strange for General Chu to frame Gu Beiyue for the sake of protecting Chu Tianyi. There was no point in overthinking things now. Chu Yuni stared at the weak Gu Beiyue as his eyes flashed with calculation. "Gu Beiyue," he said, "you were the one who valued sex over righteousness. Don't blame old man for being heartless in the future." "What are you trying to say?" Gu Beiyue asked coldly. "He, tell me. If Qin Wangfei knew that Dr. Gu from Pill Fiend Pharmacy was in old man's hands, would she come to save him?" Chu Yuni laughed out loud. "Old man will give you a chance to test Qin Wangfei's feelings for him. You better cooperate obediently." Gu Beiyue didn't express his anger, but the blood seeping out of his bandages was proof of his fury. After a while, he murmured, Chu Yuni, you've offended my shadow clan. Your crimes are grave. Your shadow clan? One man, one clan? Chu Yuni said disdainfully. He ordered his men to watch over Gu Beiwe before storming off in a huff. With Gu Beiwe in his hands, he didn't have to worry about luring out Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. Nor did he have to worry about settling accounts at Thousand Buddha Cave and the Poison Sect's Forbidden Grounds. He wasn't in a rush to settle accounts with Long Fei Ye's group, either. Right now, he was still in Western Zhou, so he had to contact General Chu as soon as possible and bring Gu Beiwe to Western Liang. But there were no signs of him being half dead, much less in dire straits. In contrast, Chu Yuni was a true weakling. No matter how fierce he was, he still had a favor to ask. What are you smiling about? Gu Beiwe, my nether clan has treated you well. Why do you repay kindness with enmity? Gu Beiwe, do you hear me? Speak. Are you going to treat me or not? Chu Yuni grabbed Gu Beiwe by the collar and shoved him aside with all his might. He'd lost all of his composure as a clan head. Old man will kill you. Chu Yuni unsheathed an arrow from his back and prepared to stab Gu Beiwe in the heart when Gu Beiwe finally spoke up. Give me medicine so I can heal my wounds. Otherwise, I promise there'll be no medicine left to save you. Treat old man's eyes first. Chu Yuni roared. You only have two choices. Give me medicine or kill me, Gu Beiwe said. Chu Yuni was so angry that he roared a few more times. He had to ask, are you going to treat old man's eyes or not? If my wounds are healed, I'll treat them for you. If not, your eyes will be ruined, Gu Beiwe said, before adding, even if you can invite the Medical Academy's head elder to help, it'll be useless. Chu Yuni fumed. Unfortunately, he had no choice but to order someone to deliver Gu Beiwe medicine. Gu Beiwe didn't panic when he saw only Jinshuang ointment. Chu Yuni should know that the longer he delayed treatment, the more dangerous it'd be. Thus, Chu Yuni would have gone to find the best medicine without any urging. As soon as they reached the county, Chu Yuni went to see a doctor. Unfortunately, the doctor was powerless to reverse the situation. All he did was treat his wounds and bandage them, then declare him blind in the right eye. Chu Yuni had no choice but to believe Gu Beiwe's threats. As Gu Beiwe predicted, he immediately went to find a pile of expensive medicinal ingredients. He assumed that Gu Beiwe would recover quickly and made strict arrangements to prevent Gu Beiwe from escaping. But this time, Gu Beiwe seemed to be seriously injured. His wounds refused to heal. Was he really unable to recover, or was Gu Beiwe delaying it? Chu Yuni had no idea, but he didn't think Gu Beiwe had any reason to delay. Chapter 587. Gu Beiwe's injuries weren't good, so Chu Yuni was on guard against him. He couldn't rush the man, so all he could do was wait for the man to continue heading east. Long Fei Ye's group was heading east as well. Gu had no interest in these court battles, but was planning to help Han Yunqi get the wood of 10,000 poisons before leaving. After all, he had to keep searching for the fire and metal of 10,000 poisons. In order to use the poison sect to deal with the medical academy, he'd done plenty of research on it. Unfortunately, he knew nothing about these two things. After finding out about head elderling's whereabouts in Westliang, Gu suddenly didn't want to leave. He didn't mind taking care of head elderling first since he couldn't destroy the medical academy for now. He'd already thought of ways to torture the man over the past few days and couldn't wait to follow Long Fei Yi to Westliang to stir things up. As for Long Fei Yi, he was still keeping an eye on the bearded man who'd been taken away from Thousand Buddha Cave. Unfortunately, Chu Shifeng didn't find out anything. Your Highness, everyone at Thousand Buddha Cave that day besides us and Chu Yuni's group were all killed to silence them. Not a single one was left alive, Chu Shifeng reported in a low voice, before adding, even the monks weren't spared. Long Fei wasn't surprised. Times of war were scarier than anything else. Emperor Kongcheng would never allow news of the thousand-year ginkgo tree to spread. That was good too. It'd save them some trouble, and Chu Yunyi's group wouldn't be able to confirm whether they'd gotten the wood of 10,000 poisons. The world was vast, so there were bound to be people who knew about the perplexing butterfly illusion. If news of this got out, it'd be bad for them. Long Fei was more curious about Emperor Kongcheng's reaction after learning of the Chu clan's netherclan identity. Han Yunqi was interested as well. With the chaos of war right now, Kongcheng won't expose the Chu clan's secrets until he's fully grasped the situation. It wasn't clear when it started, but whenever Han Yunqi commented on the political situation, no one would answer her if Long Fei didn't reply. After Han Yunqi finished speaking, there was silence. She even suspected that she would become the king of awkward silence. In fact, everyone was afraid of making a bet with her. They were worried that if they accidentally mentioned another bet while chatting, it would be another tragedy. After a while, Chu Shifeng finally asked weakly, "Esteemed Wang Fei, shouldn't Emperor Kongcheng have revealed the Chu clan's secret to the world? The fiends had betrayed the royal family of Western Qin, and they had a bad reputation. Someone will definitely hit you when you're down." Chu Shifeng clearly had a different opinion, but he was acting so modest. Tang Li chuckled and did not say anything. If someone hits you when you're down, someone will come to your rescue. Once the news came out, wouldn't those bunch of dog slaves who supported the East Qin imperial family back then all jump out one by one? Gu said with a snicker. Chu Shifeng stole a glance at the Duke of Qin, who was expressionless and unmoved. Even so, Chu Shifeng still felt his hairs stand on end. Dog slaves? Long Fei asked with amusement. Whether they're masters or slaves. Which one of them is good when it comes to fighting for power and profit? Gu laughed disdainfully. For the first time, Han Yunqi discovered that the heartless Gu had a cynical side to him. Actually, Han Yunqi didn't care much about Eastern and Western Qin. If not for that gentleman from the Shadow Clan and the Chu clan's secret, she probably wouldn't have time to find out more. When Long Fei didn't answer, Gu purposely sat down next to him and tilted his head. Hey, how many nobles did the East Qin imperial family have in their hands? Not many, I don't think. Both Chu Shifeng and Tang Li blanched at his words. In truth, their fright was unnecessary, because Gu had no idea of Long Fei's true identity. He only suspected that Long Fei had good relations with the Tang clan based on Tang Li. Gu Qixiao wasn't interested in Long Fei's identity either. He was only interested in the man's abilities. No one knew what Long Fei was thinking right now. His face was still expressionless, but he told Gu the truth. Just the black and white nobles. The White Clan was the Bailey clan of the mermaids. But that was just an internal name. Besides the East Qin imperial clan and the mermaids themselves, no one knew that the White Clan was a special branch of the ancient mermaids who could leave the water for long periods of time to move about on land. Without a doubt, the White Clan's secret skill was to dive underwater. They were invincible in the water. When the Tang clan found the White Clan, they began to infiltrate Tianning and form a navy. They borrowed Tianning's strength to raise their own military strength. As for the Black Clan, neither the Tang clan nor Long Fei himself had any news of them. Still, they were only investigating in secret, not out in the open. The Black Clan wasn't a loyal clan in the past, but had no choice but to rely on the East Qin imperial clan. Thus, Long Fei was especially cautious about this matter. Just the Black and White clans? In that case, Western Qin's imperial clan is very popular. Gu grinned. The Shadow, Nether, and Wind clans are all on the side of Western Qin's imperial clan, right? The Nether clan was the last to defect, Han Yunqi said, then added, only the Li clan is neutral. Poison lass, you know quite a bit. Gu grinned. That's why, as soon as the Chu clan's secret is exposed, the Shadow, and Wind clan's descendants will definitely seek revenge, Han Yunqi said in support of her previous point of view. But Long Fei only laughed. Do you think loyalty is something that everyone has? Long Fei asked. Western Qin's imperial clan has already been destroyed. The Shadow Clan, who used their lives to protect Western Qin's imperial clan, is still living. Where did the 7 noble families' loyalty come from? Gu laughed as well. Long Fei didn't speak. Han Yunqi knew she'd misunderstood. She'd overestimated the 7 noble families and their human nature. Aya, what's the point of talking so much? Let's bet on when that old thief Kong Cheng will reveal the Chu clan's secret to the world. Gu's words made Tang Li and Chu Shifeng bow their heads in unison. Long Fei didn't speak either. Han Yunqi replied, I won't bet. Both Tang Li and Chu Shifeng looked up at Han Yunqi at the same time, their expressions the same as one of surprise. What are you doing? Han Yunqi asked warmly. Nothing. Chu Shifeng lowered his head again. Did I look at you? Tang Li gave a cold snort before averting his eyes. Han Yunqi only felt that these 2 men were acting strangely. Something's wrong with their heads. As for betting, she'd never bet on anything she wasn't certain of. Thus, she'd never lose. Although they weren't betting, they'd kept an eye on Emperor Kong Cheng's movements as they headed east. They'd kept an eye on the Chu clan's situation, as well as Empress Shui's whereabouts. In the span of a month, the Chu clan troops had retreated east. For some reason, Emperor Kong Cheng hadn't revealed the Chu clan's secret. He'd used all of Western Zhou's military forces against the Chu clan, forcing them to retreat step by step. How could a single clan resist the might of an entire nation before its wings were fully fledged? Just when everyone was certain that the Chu clan would lose, news of a shocking event broke out in Westliang that shocked all of Cloud Realm continent. Empress Chu had tripped in front of Emperor Tianhui's sickbed and given birth prematurely. She'd given birth to a 7-month-old baby boy who was still alive. News of the baby's birth didn't spread out of the palace, but the next day all of Westliang was talking about the dazzling golden light that had appeared in the skies of the imperial palace last night. Very soon, news of the golden light, signaling the arrival of the holy sage, spread throughout the city. A few days later, all of Tianing country had heard of the news. Emperor Tianhui had seen Empress Chu fall and bleed with his own eyes, so he was convinced that she'd been born prematurely. He was still marveling at the fact that his imperial son was still alive when he heard the news. Naturally, he was overjoyed and bestowed upon him the courtesy name Zun. Despite the constant pleas of the other imperial sons, some of whom even risked their lives to persuade Emperor Tianhui that premature babies wouldn't live long, Emperor Tianhui still insisted on making Chu Qingge the crown prince. Emperor Kong Cheng was still in the morning court when he heard the news. He suddenly stood up from his dragon throne, startling all of his officials to their knees. Golden light, signaling the arrival of the holy sage. Could it be? Emperor Kong Cheng muttered to himself as he recalled the words of the Thousand Buddha Caves abbot, predestination. Could it be that the disappearance of the ginkgo tree was predestination, and the birth of a holy sage from the Chu clan's daughter was predestination as well? Was Western Zhou going to rise from his hands? No. Emperor Kong Cheng was lost in his thoughts as he shook his head. Your Majesty, this is all heresy to mislead the masses. As this old official sees it, that premature child must be a full-term baby. Westliang has already fallen under the Chu clan's control. That's why they're putting on such a show. Your Majesty, you mustn't diminish your own might by raising the spirits of others. Your Majesty, abandon the Empress and kill the Chu clan troops. Finally, someone in the imperial court formally proposed abandoning the Empress. If not for the fact that the Empress was in the Chu clan's hands, Emperor Kong Cheng would have been even more ruthless. Your Majesty, if we don't make a move now, Tianing's troops will cross the border and reinforce the 3 eastern prefectures. Your Majesty, Emperor Tianhui has plenty of soldiers in his hands. Now they're all in the Chu clan's hands. Emperor Kong Cheng's expression was grave as the officials tried to persuade him. He needed time to think things over. Meanwhile, Long Fei and the rest weren't surprised by the news. Golden light, signaling the arrival of the holy sage. Only they could think of something like that. Han Yunqi laughed coldly. She'd seen plenty of such tricks in both official and unofficial histories. Still, it had to be said that such tricks could fool not only the common people, but the monarchs as well. Long Fei naturally didn't believe it. Even if he didn't know the truth of the premature birth, he'd never believe such things. As for Gu, he was more concerned about how long head Elderling would stay in Western Liang. At the very least, he'd still be there by the time they arrived. Soon enough, all of the Chu clan troops retreated to the eastern regions of Western Zhou and occupied Yuyun, Fenglin, and Yaoshui prefectures that bordered Western Zhou and Tianing. Western Zhou's troops had reached the city walls as well, and the Chu clan had used Empress Shui as a hostage to threaten the two armies. Empress Shui's in danger, Tang Li exclaimed in a scholarly manner. His white robes made him look like a scholar. Emperor Kongqing's going to have a headache. Chu Shifeng grinned. Han Yunqi hesitated, but still asked openly, if the crown prince is grounded, will the princess not show up to save her mother? Although Duanmu Yao wasn't Western Zhou's princess, she was still a member of Celestial Mountain, a powerful backer. They were mother and daughter. After all, Duanmu Yao wouldn't be so heartless, would she? Just as Long Fei Yi was about to reply, another unexpected piece of news arrived. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.